Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the May 14, 2018 regular meeting of the DeKalb City Council. Prior to our roll call this evening, I'd like to remind folks who would like to speak under public participation or any item that may be on our agenda this evening. We certainly welcome that. We would ask that you fill out a speaker request form prior to that. They're available in the back foyer, and please give those to our Deputy City Clerk, Ruth Scott, who will get them up to me, and I'll try to get these in the order in not only in which, not necessarily in which they were given, but in the order that follows the agenda tonight. With that, I'd like to ask our Deputy City Clerk, Ruth Scott, to call the roll, please.
Jacobson? Here. Finucane?
Here.
Marquardt?
Here.
Fagan?
Here.
Norrico?
Here.
Verbic?
Here.
Favor?
Here.
Smith?
Here.
8 present.
Thank you. Our police officer on duty tonight is Keith Erke, and I'd like Keith to come up and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item C on the agenda this evening, approval of tonight's agenda with any additions, deletions, or changes. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda this evening? It has been requested by the Daily Chronicle that we move an item on the agenda, which is the item on food trucks, up closer to the front of the agenda, so as to not have a number of folks who might like to speak to that item to wait around until the last part of the meeting. I have no problem with that, but I don't believe I can make a motion to change the agenda. Would anybody?
I'd like to make a motion. Item 13, right? If we could bring that up to item 1 and then push everything down.
Second.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we move item number 13, resolution approving the temporary process for interim licensure of food and beverage vending vehicle, to number 1 on the agenda. That would be items for separate action.
Discussion, please.
Yes.
I'm just concerned about people who have read the agenda, see how late it is on the agenda, and don't plan on being here this early to take care of that, and then would miss their opportunity to speak to that item.
Good point. Alderman Verbic?
We could still take their comment until the end of the meeting, couldn't we?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we move item 13 to item number 1 under items for separate action. Any other changes or deletions, additions to our agenda tonight? Roll call, please.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Finucane?
No.
Marquardt?
No.
Fagan?
Yes.
Norrico?
Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Favor?
No.
Smith?
Yes.
6 yes.
So that passes?
Yes.
Okay.
Excuse me, point of clarification, wasn't it 5 to 3?
It was 5-3.
5-3.
Can we have a confirmation of the vote count, please?
So you had 5 yes and 3 no.
Thank you.
Still passes. Is that correct? Okay. Okay. We have approved that change. Now I would ask for an approval of the overall agenda with that change.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Markwart,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you. There are no public hearings scheduled for this evening. And now we move along to special items. Item E on your agenda, Proudly DeKalb. I'd call your attention to the monitors before you. These are 2 DeKalb High School seniors. And as you see, the young man there said that he would attend the girls' appearance in Les Mis if she would go to the prom with him. I think that's novel. I think it's wonderful. When I discovered that the young man, his name is Kevin Fagan, and the young lady is Grace Verbic, children of our 4th and 6th Ward aldermen. And I said, if that isn't Proudly DeKalb, what is? So before we move on to the agenda, I'd like to ask Alderman Fagan or Alderman Verbic if they'd like to make a comment on this nice-looking picture.
I had no idea this was coming. 3 weeks ago, I had no idea. I mean, we're just she's a great person, comes from a great family, and I think they're going to all have a good time. I want all the kids to have a good time. Be safe, but have a real good time.
And the prom's this coming weekend, is it?
This weekend.
Yeah, good. Mike, you have anything to say?
Well, in addition to the excitement of Les Mis getting wrapped up for the first performance, the lobby was full of excitement. Well, it got even more excited when Kevin came up with this proposition, and it was neat to have all of the students cheering in the lobby for them, and just a really great experience.
Well, congratulations to you fathers and nice-looking kids. Thank you, Byron, for putting that up on the screen. Kevin Fagan, Grace Verbic. Thank you. Okay, moving along to Monday items now. Our first, we have a number of proclamations tonight, and again, I will try to keep those relatively short, not reading the entire proclamation, but we'll be presenting those to some folks along the way here. The first one is for Building Safety Month, and Thaddeus, if you could be making your way up here. I, Jerry Smith, Mayor of the City of DeKalb, do hereby proclaim the month of May 2018 as Building Safety Month. Accordingly, I encourage our citizens to join with their communities in participation of Building Safety Month activities. And I'd like to present this proclamation to our Chief Building Official, Thaddeus Mack. Thaddeus?
Congratulations.
Our second proclamation is National Skilled Nursing Care Week. I, Jerry Smith, as Mayor of the City of DeKalb, declare the week of May 13 through 19, 2018 as National Skilled Nursing Care Week, a week to honor both our vulnerable citizens who receive care and the dedicated ones who are providing that care. There is no one present to accept this. However, we will be sending this proclamation to our skilled nursing facilities here within the City of DeKalb. Our third proclamation of the evening is National Police Week, and if Chief Lowry would work his way up here, I, Jerry Smith, as Mayor of the City of DeKalb, Illinois, urge our citizens to join in commemorating law enforcement officers, past and present, who by their faithful and loyal devotion to their communities have established for themselves the rights and security of all citizens, and do hereby proclaim the week of May 13 through 19, 2018 as National Police Week in the city of DeKalb. And I'm going to present this to our police chief, Gene Lowry. Our next proclamation is Bike to Work Day, and I'd like Amy Dahl of Live Health DeKalb County to make her way up here. I, Jerry Smith, as mayor of the city of DeKalb, do hereby proclaim May 18, 2018 as Bike to Work Day and encourage all citizens to ride their bicycles to work, to school, to the store, to the park, around their neighborhoods, and with friends and family to promote the personal and societal benefits achieved from bicycling. Are both of you representatives of Live Health? Well,
Yes,
with your
I'm
T-shirts.
Lisa Cummings. Amy
Yeah.
Dahl is not present tonight.
Okay, Lisa, hi. I know Mary, hi.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to present the certificate then to both of you. Are you going to be riding your bike to work?
Halfway.
Absolutely.
I live in Hampshire.
Okay. Well, you'll get your exercise.
We also have shirts for all of you promoting our new 3-foot safety law.
Whoa.
And you've seen these signs throughout DeKalb at the last couple of
Yes.
So
Right.
Mayor,
Well, thank you.
Mayor, Lisa had a few words that she wanted to share with the
Well, sure,
community, if that's
absolutely,
okay.
please. And if you go to the podium, please, both of you, Mary and Lisa, and make a few words, and then I have this certificate here for you, too.
Okay, thank you. On behalf of Live Healthy DeKalb County Active Transportation Team, we would like to take the opportunity to thank you for recognizing May 18th as Bike to Work Day in the city of DeKalb. Without the support and recognition of elected officials like all of you, we would not be where we are today without the strong collaboration and communication partnering with you to make DeKalb a more safe, bikeable, and walkable community where our children and families live, work, and play. Through your support and advocacy, we have been able to make great strides in the promotion and connectivity of some of our most used biking and walking trails throughout the city. Your support also allowed us the opportunity to submit an application to the American League of Illinois Bicyclists to apply for a bronze status recognition that our city is so proud of. And I hope you have seen those signs throughout the city of DeKalb, because they are up now. Lastly, your supportive events like Bike to Work Day get our youth and community to start thinking about how they can bike to work or school, to whether ride or save money or time, pump those pedals to preserve their health or the environment, or simply just to explore the DeKalb community. National Bike Month is an opportunity to celebrate the unique power of the bicycle and the many reasons that we ride. We thank the city of DeKalb for being our active transportation champions. Thank you so much.
Congratulations. Thank you very much. Far be it from me to deny a young lady with a brightly colored shirt like that not to speak to the microphone, right? So, thank you very much. Our next proclamation is National Emergency Medical Services Week, and I'm going to ask our Fire Chief, Eric Hicks, to make a few comments, and then I'd like to read a little bit about the proclamation. Eric.
Mayor, I'm going to have our firefighters from Southside Station
Great.
come up to accept this proclamation. As you know, EMS is a very important part of our organization. It accounts for about 75% of the call load that we respond to, or about 4,500 calls. So this is Lieutenant Jason Pavlik, firefighter Chris Krupa, Don Zuniga, and Lieutenant Tim Morey. So they're going to accept that on behalf of the fire department. Thank you.
I, Jerry Smith, Mayor of the City of DeKalb, in recognition of this event, do hereby proclaim the week of May 20 through 26, 2018 as Emergency Medical Services Week and with the theme EMS Strong, Stronger Together, encourage the community to observe this week with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your service to our community.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your help. Thank you very much. Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Get some purple off. Thank you. Get away without it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Much appreciated.
Okay, I see Tim Holdeman, our Public Works Director, about ready to accept this proclamation. Tim, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Sure.
It's my honor to accept the proclamation. Our community is truly blessed to have the professionals that are dedicated in all city departments to serve this community. In Public Works, I know that many of our employees chose Public Works as a career early because they wanted to serve the community that they were born and raised in. Others, such as myself, who are transplants to DeKalb, are honored to work side by these longtime residents who serve the city. I continue to be impressed by the breadth of Public Works and what they do. I want to share with you just a few things that fall within the responsibility of Public Works. The airport, the streets, the sidewalks, our alleys, traffic lights, traffic signs, our stormwater system, transportation planning, the bus system, engineering design, permit reviews, construction, maintenance of our streets, leaf collection, snow and ice removal, street sweeping, forestry, city-owned fleet, city-owned facilities, and then, of course, there's the water system, that every drop of water we consume is made possible by that group. So as you can see, it is quite diverse. And I think that we would all do well to reflect upon all of the contributions that these Public Works employees make to our community. Thank you, Mayor.
I, Jerry Smith, as Mayor of the City of DeKalb, Illinois, do hereby proclaim the week of May 20 through 26, 2018 as National Public Works Week in the City of DeKalb, and call upon all citizens and civic organizations to acquaint themselves with the issues involved in providing our public works and to recognize the contributions which Public Works officials make every day to our health, safety, comfort, and quality of life. Presenting this to our Public Works Director, Tim Holdeman.
Thanks, Tim.
Okay, we have one presentation tonight, and that's AdventureWorks FY 2018 Human Services Funding Annual Report by Executive Director Lynette Spencer and Adventure Programming Director Ryan Bromberek. Ryan, did I pronounce that name correctly?
Yes, you did. Most people
Okay.
don't. You just want to grab one of those and pass it down.
Is Lynette here? I didn't see her.
Lynette is not here, so you guys
Okay.
are going to have to put up with me for and because Lynette's not here, and I was very kindly voluntold to do this, I can't answer a lot to the numbers when it comes to funding, but I can tell you what that funding does, especially for our positive youth development programming here in DeKalb. So as of last November, AdventureWorks became the very first community-based program to become accredited ever in anywhere. We're accredited through the Outdoor Behavioral Healthcare Council. And what we do with our positive youth development programming is we have borrowed the 5C model for positive youth development, which is competence, confidence, connection, compassion, and character. And since we're a community-based program, we've added a 6th C to that, which is contribution. So anytime we do any of our positive youth development programs, we try to add a level of a service project in it. An example of that would be our CCC group, which is our Children's Conservation Corps. That's a group of young people, all under 12 years old, who meet at our office, and we travel out to one of the forest preserves. All these kids are from the city of DeKalb. And when we go to the forest preserves, we'll do a quick lesson about why that place or that space is important, whether it's the environment, whether it's the cultural significance of the place. And then we go exploring. And I wrote a part of the curriculum that we would pick up any litter debris that we find, one for the contribution element of our 6 C's, but also because I just wanted them to be kids and go explore and get out in the woods and look under logs and flip rocks over. And in the first 8 weeks we had that program, we had over 60 pounds of litter. This was 4 children under the age of 12 years old collected 60 pounds of litter, meeting once a week over 8 weeks in the forest preserves. We also work a lot in the schools here with the Target. We have worked with the Target program at the high school. I was out with Dana Walker's class from the high school last Monday. We hit a geocache at Afton Forest Preserve, if anybody's interested. It's the newest geocache in DeKalb. We're also going to be expanding our school programming. We're going to be in Huntley Middle School next year. I've worked at Clinton Rosette this year. I had about 160 8th graders in under 2 hours come through our program, where we did some team building and with a theme focused on appearances and everything. So the kids got to know each other a little bit better. We also offer programming after school for our teenagers. We have a group of teenagers who all come together for various reasons, and we go out each week, work on different things, the group able to support themselves through all of that. And yeah, I think, are there any questions? Also, I don't know how much time I have, because I can talk.
Any questions of AdventureWorks? Just for the information of those watching and in our audience, AdventureWorks is one of 12 human service agencies funded in FY 2018. Our total city funding for FY 2018 to these organizations, $144,500. $10,000 of that went to AdventureWorks. This particular allocation of $2,500 is for the quarter. The percentage of that grant from the city represents about 3.40% of the total revenues of AdventureWorks. And the number of DeKalb residents served during this quarter, 164. A total number of clients served in the first quarter, 213, so 164 of the 213 were DeKalb residents. And so those are just some facts and figures that might be interesting to those of you who appreciate the human services funding that the City of DeKalb provides.
Yeah, I do want to add that the funding has been absolutely instrumental this year. Going into this quarter, we had already seen more people than we had seen all of last year. We've grown faster than we ever would have expected. And what we've seen is that a poverty of finance has led to a poverty of positive experiences. So through this funding, we're able to provide those positive experiences for this community's youth.
Ryan, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, moving right along.
Mayor?
Yes, we did not have our Annie Glidden North revitalization plan. You were going to jack me up on that, weren't you, Mike?
Never.
Oh, never. Okay, okay. Let's have an Annie Glidden North revitalization plan task force update. Our two aldermen from the 1st and 2nd wards, Alderman Jacobson and Alderman Finucane, are our council liaisons to the Annie Glidden North plan. And I'm going to let those gentlemen have the floor now.
We had a full task force meeting for the first time in the last couple months. We had instructed, or the chair had instructed, the individual subcommittees to meet multiple times to prepare their individual committee reports in advance of the meeting so we can come and discuss some of the ideas those committees had. It was extremely interesting to see how, even though the committees were set up with very different focuses, that they came together and suggested many of the same projects, and realized that several of those high priority items ran through multiple checkboxes of those committees. The discussion going forward that we had at the last meeting was that many of the subcommittee members felt that those meetings seemed to be much more productive, obviously as smaller groups and more in-depth groups with discussion and the different individual members bringing their talents and knowledge to those meetings that might not necessarily shine through in such a large group meeting with 30 or 40 people in attendance. I thought it was extremely positive and productive where we're going in the direction. The question that I asked on behalf of the council was focused on 912 Edgebrook. And I said the council is clearly looking at options of where to go forward. From my impression, the consensus of the meeting was to hold off on directing until the final reports are out, until it's added to a more comprehensive understanding of what that property can and will do for the neighborhood. Each committee effectively brought it up on their agendas individually, and several had individual recommendations, but wanted to bring that back for further discussion to the entirety of the board when they meet going forward. After the meeting, it was discussed that the committees would again probably continue to meet, the subcommittees on their own time at their schedule. And we are exploring now what the future of those larger meetings look like as the process is coming, as the initial process is now coming to a close in terms of the community input needed to create some sort of plan in the neighborhood is entering the phase where that plan is about to be, the preliminary plan is about to be drafted. The question becomes, how will the committee, what will the committee do going forward? What will the task force do going forward? I think there was a significant amount of interest in continuing work, whether it was to help guide that plan into fruition, to help bring forward areas where we can improve in the future as the plan rolls out, and to ensure that there's some accountability. That was the other big message that I got, is that several of the people that have now, again, volunteered their time going through this committee process and bringing their time and talents are worried that without a defined source of funding, that these efforts will, again, be pushed to the side in lieu of other concerns we have, and want to make sure that there is going to be continuing follow-up and there's going to be continuing understanding by the city that this plan has to be a focus we have. And I certainly appreciated that mentality and that desire of many of the members to continue to go forward. The dates we're seeing now that Adam provided us for the preliminary plan, look, the very rough preliminary plan will be in June. There is a discussion now of significant time to plan for open to the community and open to the public meetings for comment and for consideration and to understand some of the ideas that have come out of these meetings and the work Camiros has done. And I know one of the concerns was that without the students here in the summer, there may be some impediment to that process. And we are looking at some solutions to try to work that out. Fortunately now our intern is the former Speaker of the Student Senate who presented to us earlier, and she will probably be able to make some significant inroads, being that she is just freshly graduated in the last week, into those student populations for us, and that we can get those scheduled throughout the summer to invite the public in, to unveil some of the thoughts we're thinking, to bring up questions, comments, concerns, and to have a plan in place going forward at the end of August is our plan now. So again, the plan is moving. We are focusing on it. The task force is working diligently. There are still lots of questions and comments I'm sure that we will need to enroll the final plan and the final planning for the neighborhood, and I look forward to finally seeing that plan coming into view.
All right, I'll add a little bit. One of the other topics that I think a lot of people talked about in the different subcommittees was transportation. And not through any fault of their own, but I don't think they realized at the time how far along the implementation of the coordination of the two transit systems has really come along. I think that we will continue to explore that with them. They're concerned how soon was some of this going to take place, and I think they're truly surprised that some of the implementation will actually occur this fall. And so that we're going to make progress there, and that's one of their major concerns is transportation in the neighborhood, and that the fact that we're going to make some of those things happen this quickly, I think they see as a bit of a hope for them with the overall plan. Again, just to echo what Dave said about the Edgebrook property, I think a lot of them do want to hold off until we can see where we're going to go, but they're also, again, unknowing about the condition of the building, and maybe we haven't made that clear enough, whether at our own council meetings or the other discussions that we've had about it. But otherwise, I think Dave very well represented the discussions held that night.
Yeah, thank you to both of you. And Dave, you live in that neighborhood, and you know, I know that we've paid for that building. I would certainly think that we would want to listen to the residents and listen to the folks who are on the Annie-Glidden North task force as it relates to holding on to that building. And I take it that if you would see something that would call for us to need to raise that building immediately, you'd probably speak up. So I appreciate your thoughts on that. Okay. Any questions of David or Bill? If not, there are no mayor's appointments this evening. Again, I encourage folks who are either interested in or know folks who may be interested in helping us with boards and commissions, because we're going to see quite a few reappointments and appointments early summer, and that's all tied into the fact that this city at one time had a July 1, June 30 fiscal year. Now with the new year, we have a number of expirations of terms on June 30th. So I've got my work cut out for me there. Let's move right along then. We have covered the Adventure Works portion of our agenda. Number 4 is public participation. We have a couple of folks who would like to speak on items not listed on our agenda. The first one being our former mayor, Bessie Chronopoulos.
Sorry, I didn't fill out a sheet, but I was going to skip it, but what the heck? Here goes. I just have to say that the meeting that I just sat through, the COW meeting, was probably one of the best meetings I've seen in a long time from the city of DeKalb. The mayor was strong, conducted the meeting in a very proprietary way, moved it right along, and every single member of the city council was engaged in conversation and discussion. This is something that I have so been hoping for and wanting, and on a very important topic, how the TIF money should be distributed. And the staff, Jason in particular, did something that I've been asking for a long time, a good analysis of some of the history and some of the background of TIF. I think that whole process, the whole deliberation is going to help you a great deal in making the proper decisions along the way that are so sorely needed in our community. Keep it up. You're on the right track, and I thank you.
Thank you, Bessie. Appreciate the comments. Our next speaker is Jim Mason. Jim?
Let's do something. Time is wasting. Who said that? A few minutes. I think you did. Yes? Jason's subjects are my forte. I walked in the room and Jason was amiably laying out how do you handle projects that are replacing your community, it's a good idea to make sure they have the money. And so you can do that with a letter of credit. I move on. Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff, citizens, all my friends. What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and over. I've said before, I've been coming in this room since 1969. About 1975, we moved into the city manager form of government. Tom Rosenau said to me, you shouldn't do it. I've actually changed my mind on that, because if you elect a mayor that speaks well, looks good, but doesn't know anything, you're stuck. At least with a city manager, there is some form of competence. It could be through a degree or could be on-the-job training. I won't do that. I'm here tonight to share my thoughts about volunteering my services to be the city manager for the city of DeKalb, period. I realize my offer is unusual, and it's taking some time to sink in for some folks. But time is of the essence. So I'm back here tonight, really for the first time speaking to you, direct, tonight, to clarify some of my thoughts. First, I'm so overqualified to be the city manager of DeKalb, it's not funny. To find somebody with my qualifications, you would have to pay $1 million per year to take this job, and he or she would not want to live in DeKalb. A lot of people don't make $1 million, but a lot of people do. I personally have been in business in DeKalb since February 1967, when I was a junior in college at Northern Illinois University. I was so bored with school, I started a business in 1967. I have owned and managed real estate in this town for 49 years. I have assets of over $100 million in 4 cities in the United States. It is easy to understand why somebody with my business acumen and credentials would not take the city manager job in DeKalb and have to live here at the same time for $160,000. It sounds like a lot of money to a lot of people, but somebody with qualifications to run this corporation, it's not. I could be, are you guys following along with this?
You're at 3 minutes, Jim, so
come on,
try to wrap it up.
I got people to work with me on this. I could be spending my time on my yacht, sailing the Bahamas Straits, or golfing anywhere in the world, but for some reason, I just can't let DeKalb continue on this path. So I'm here tonight. I have been running my city within a city for over 35 years. As you can see, I don't need any practice. Tonight, I'm suggesting to the City Council motion to approve Jim Mason to volunteer to assume city manager duties tomorrow, if feasible. Further, since your assistant city manager will be under contract here for another 6 or 7 weeks, I would like to tutor under her for her remaining time. This would give me a chance to assess if I can really make a difference for the city of DeKalb. If I can't, I will fade away like General Douglas MacArthur did when his farewell speech in the House of the Chambers in Washington, April 19, 1951. At the same time, if the council would like to keep looking for a city manager or Mr. or Mrs. Wright, I will gladly interview like all the other applicants. In fact, I would enjoy that process, the interview process, since only Dwayne calls me on my radio show to give me a hard time. Since I'm making a substantial commitment to the community, I would like an affirmative 8-0 vote for the acceptance of this position. As a city manager, I would like to be available, this is something new, available to the citizens with issues that they are concerned about. How would this work? A person would create...
Can you wrap it up, Jim? You're at 5 now.
This is pretty important, Jerry. Create a written statement for what they would like to talk about. This is people could come and ask questions, what's going on around them. I would talk to them. After reading through all the statements, I will meet with a select group of people. I have been doing this for 40 years. These interviews will make a difference. They would happen either at my office or at City Hall. I'm just about done, Jerry. And thank you for your patience. Lastly, people that know me know I usually figure things out for myself and don't need consultation or consultants to do so. If something is over my head, I will not hesitate to call the right people. When I call folks, usually they pick up the phone and they're glad to communicate with me. Thank you very much. I rest. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you, Jim. Our next speaker, speaking to something not on the agenda, is John Anderson. And then Dwayne Brown.
Thank you, Council. John Anderson, 4th Ward. I think most of you know me. But anyway, the last 4 years with our previous city manager, it's been kind of a nightmare for the public here. You come into this building and it's locked up. I can go visit somebody at a prison easier than you can get in this building. But that's just one item. And the people that need to be available to the public are in hiding. You got to get an appointment. And I didn't think as long as I lived that I'd ever see a tavern business go up for sale and have buyers only to be turned down by the city wanting to jump through hoops. I mean, the building was fine for 40 years while they were there, but now the city wants them to make a lot of changes. That's why this town is not business friendly. And when I was reading through the agenda, I see the mayor's appointments was just ahead of us. And I often wonder, well, why doesn't the mayor appoint Mr. Mason to be the interim city manager for a while till we straighten this out? He's not being paid just like the other appointments that the mayor makes. And I know it still have to go through the city council, and I know there's a couple on the council that would be dead against it. But if you want to see this city moving ahead, you're going to have to do something. And I think Jim Mason's got the answers. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay, Dwayne Brown, also from the 4th Ward. Hi, Dwayne.
Dwayne Brown. We have a golden opportunity here to pick a city manager who has a working knowledge of the city, who has been a successful businessman since 1967, knows the people of DeKalb, other than an outsider you bring in, and they have to be introduced to everybody. They have to go through the process. He can start immediately. This is an opportunity we shouldn't squander. We should accept this. And when is the last time salary wasn't a consideration on a city manager? I think it is time that we do the right thing. We accept Jim Mason's offer. Let him be city manager. Let him use his extensive knowledge to right the city, to right the ship, set it on the proper course. As of right now, we're capsized and going down by the bow. Did anybody get their taxes? Everybody got their taxes. What's up? The library board, the District 428, TIF 2, and the city of DeKalb. I want to see taxes lowered. I mean, our property taxes are excessive. They're too high. Our sales taxes are too high. That's why we're stifling. Businesses are stifling. Look at our empty storefronts. We know the problems here. Pick someone who has the knowledge to rectify the situation. Jim Mason is that person. I mean, we're squandering an opportunity here if we don't take his offer. And I think the last two city managers, we've had very little economic development. You know, I can see with his extensive knowledge that economic development would happen. And a lot of people aren't taking him serious. The general manager of the Chronicle, Eric Olson, he wrote a sarcastic article, and as if he wasn't a serious candidate. I'd like to see the council and the staff consider him a serious candidate. He's very knowledgeable. We need him now, and I say accept his offer. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwayne. There are no other folks who have handed in a speaker request form for items not under the agenda. We do have at least one on an item on the agenda, so we'll move forward. Speaking of agenda, we have a consent agenda. All items listed on the consent agenda will be enacted in one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless requested by a council member, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda. The items on the consent agenda tonight: approval of city council minutes. A, minutes of the committee of the whole meeting of April 9, 2018. B, minutes of the regular city council meeting of April 9, 2018. C, minutes of the special committee of the whole meeting of April 17, 2018. D, minutes of the committee of the whole meeting of April 23, 2018. E, minutes of the regular city council meeting of April 23, 2018. Number 2, receive and file. A, accounts payable and payroll through May 14, 2018 in the amount of $2,844,855.15. B, FY 2018 Human Services Funding First Quarter Report. Motion.
So moved.
Second.
And been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda as read. Any discussion? Roll call.
Markwart,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
8 yes.
Motion passes. Okay, if you recall, we moved what is item number 13 on your agenda under items for separate action to number 1, due to the fact that we thought some folks might want to speak to this, including our councilman, and that is Resolution 2018-062, approving a temporary process for interim licensure of food and beverage vending vehicles.
So moved.
Motion.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Before we have discussion on the item, I'd like to ask our Community Development Director, Jo Ellen Charlton, to speak to this item. Jo Ellen?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you are aware, staff is in the process of evaluating significant revisions to various sections of our city code, those that regulate certain types of events and operations within the city. Specifically, tonight, you're being asked to consider as an interim measure a resolution that would implement temporary processes for regulating food trucks, food and beverage vending vehicles. So I want to go through why we're here and provide you with a little bit of background. As most everybody is aware, last year in 2017, the DeKalb Rotary conducted a Trucktoberfest. It was a new festival in the community, and as part of getting that festival set up, we were in a new location, and they wanted to bring food trucks to the community, and we had a lot of issues about which property they were leasing. One of the main concerns that they expressed prior to the event, that we were working hard with them to try and rectify, was all of the regulations that we had for food trucks. They brought this to our attention. We worked with them. We were able to put something together that was specific to their needs, so we kind of backed out of our codes and wrote a specific agreement for that purpose. So we're going to go through that process and continue to make changes and bring that back to you. We've been continuing to work with them on the 2018 event, and it's anticipated that we'll bring that forward to council for approval in the coming months. At the same time, or a little bit later than that activity, we started talking with various vendors and people in the community about potential new events in downtown. You know, one of the council objectives is to have additional events in the downtown as a means to stimulate interest and economic development in the community. As part of that process, we were asked by promoters of those events to consider different things. And again, food trucks came up, but also another item that came up was how alcohol is served within the community. For example, some people were questioning whether we have to always enclose or cage in people within a fenced area for some of the alcohol that's served at the events. Are there instances that we would allow smaller events or certain types of venues to, we're not going to let them roam freely throughout the community, but not feel like you have to go inside and be fenced in? Again, as a direct result of that communication with those folks, we have been working with those organizations on a separate agreement that would come forward. Our intent with all of this is to, what we've called in the report and what's being termed in the community is a beta test. So we want to take a look at how these things work in reality before we come back to you with an official ordinance amendment that would change it. And why is that important? When we look at the food truck ordinance that's currently on the books, that ordinance was pretty recently approved. And at the time, it was approved as a result of facts in place at the time that made sense at the time. So for example, a few of the issues that were under consideration when the earlier ordinance was amended was that several communities surrounding us were having issues with safety concerns for children. So ice cream trucks were found to have been promoting predatory sexual behavior. So we wanted to make sure that ice cream truck vendors would be properly vetted and reviewed for background checks, for example. Another very specific instance happened last year in the city of DeKalb when Mediterranean was moving out of their location as a result of the Autos project and the demolition of those buildings. We were working very hard with him to try and locate an alternate space for him. And in the interim, we decided to move forward and try to work with him on a temporary food truck location. He kind of got ahead of us a little bit and decided to retrofit an RV and try to use that as a food vending vehicle. And in the process of doing that, he put a greased fryer up close to the door where people would need to go in and out of, so any employees that might be in the RV at the time of a grease fire would have no way to get out of it. So really, we were just trying to implement basic security issues for food trucks and what they have moving forward. If we move forward with any type of a modification, we want to use these beta tests to inform us about what would be the best code to make so that we don't change a code. Let's say, for example, fees have come up, and I know the newspaper recently did an article about food trucks. In that case, they reported on an individual who didn't communicate with us, so we didn't really have an opportunity to advise them what the community's resources could have helped them with. In this instance, if we move forward with the streamlined process, the resolution as proposed as an interim measure would help us put together the appropriate codes. This resolution, as it's proposed, would do a couple of things and would allow two separate approaches specifically to food trucks. If the food truck is proposed to be involved in a special event in the city, then no background check would be provided. So in other words, if it's a brief event, 2 or 3 days, where the organizers are bringing food trucks into the community that are kind of tried and true, that's less of an interest on behalf of the city. Those vehicles, however, would be subject to a brief inspection by city officials. And this isn't a food or a health department inspection. This is checking for those things to make sure
that we have basic life safety issues in there, like fire extinguishers, suppression systems, that the tanks aren't mounted improperly on the vehicle as a means to provide safety for the vehicle. For food trucks that are proposed to be used on a mobile basis within the community, we would still think that providing a background check should be required so that we could go through the process and make sure that we're not inviting people into the community that could pose a safety risk for the community. However, what we're suggesting, and again, this is in response to the recent, once we found out that there were issues with fees and other issues, the resolution as we're proposing at this point as an interim measure would look to reduce those fees. So let's see if that makes a difference. So again, this is in response to trying to be responsive to the more recent concerns expressed about the trucks. Approval of the resolution is another step in evaluating what works and what doesn't. So we would expect through the summer to evaluate what works and include those changes in possible code amendments that we will put together for the council's formal consideration either during the winter or certainly prior to the next season. We haven't yet had any additional public feedback on this. We were asked to put this together so that we could, the council could take action on any new food truck options that become available. But we're certainly interested in hearing any of the council or community's feedback. It's also important to note that as an interim measure, again, this is a resolution, it's not an ordinance, so we can use everything that's within this proposal moving forward up and until the time an ordinance is approved, and then that ordinance would repeal this prior resolution and then follow whatever new codes would be provided. Again, some options are provided for your consideration. You can approve the resolution, you can request modifications to the resolution, or you can choose not to approve the resolution moving forward. So I'm interested in any comments or feedback that you have about what we have prepared for your consideration.
Okay, I thought the resolution was fairly straightforward. Any discussion and comments? Alderman Favor.
I just had a question. So if someone wanted to bring a food truck to, say, the farmer's market every single week, do they need to get inspected every single week? Is that
No.
part of,
What we're proposing to do would be to evaluate the food trucks once a year, if it's the same one. If a new one comes in, then we would look to have that evaluated.
Yeah, I think one of the largest complaints that I've heard in this whole food truck scenario is, I think we were on an island when we as a community said that we had to, that a food truck operator had to come back every month. You know, it's just like, what is this Mickey Mouse? Let's do it for one period of time. So I like this provision in here that it would be for a year. That's just a comment on your comment, Alderman Favor. Yes, Alderman Noriko.
I appreciate the effort at being responsive to a concern that has been brought up. Have you gotten any feedback or had any contact with the individual who did have the issues with the ordinances written?
From Tina's Tacos? Mm-hmm. No, we have not.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Any other comments? Alderman Jacobson.
I think we have to be careful to a point in terms of discussing fees and those things, and be cognizant of the fact of how many of these trucks operate. The benefit in having a food truck is it's a cash-only business that regularly, as in the industry occurs, is not reporting their sales tax to the city of DeKalb. The reality that many of these trucks in other communities are being used both as a supplement to and deterrent of brick and mortar restaurants in those communities is also a reality. They're transfer sales. So if you're taking the money out of one business and bringing it into another, and that secondary business is not paying sales taxes on those dollars, not only is the brick and mortar business
Double
owner
whammy.
suffering, but the city is suffering
Double whammy.
in terms of how those things are being done. I personally don't feel that $50 a month was unreasonable. It allowed the ice cream operators to effectively buy monthlies as they went and keep it cheap enough so that they weren't forced to pay for an annual license, and allowed the year-round operators, and again, the reality is very few of these trucks are operating during the winter, to not have to pay those costs month or annually without getting the full 12 months of benefit out of them. So again, I know why it was created that way. The discussion is whether or not our fees are comparable to other places, and that I think we should have more information on. I know when the original law was passed, we had compared those things. To realize some of the comments made in the article in the paper, claiming that Aurora was so much cheaper to operate, where their health department permits are literally double the price of DeKalb counties, I thought was unfair to a point, and I worry that we are overreacting at this point. Well, I do think, again, monthlies, for those that don't want them, are unreasonable and were a burden on those truck operators for certain, and I had heard the same complaints over the last year and a half. Well, I think that we have to take a very strong look at those fees to make sure that they're making sense. Again, rushing into it without that sort of information, I think, is a poor precedent to set.
What I did discover during this process was that if a food truck, and for example, there may be a food truck that operates out of Sycamore or DeKalb, if that food truck is catering into a business or into an organization, there is no licensing or permitting whatsoever. They simply are dealing with that business to come in and provide barbecue or whatever. Where we have the permitting process is when that same company comes in and wants to set up next to a business and sell its product. Then we get into that scenario where I think the permitting procedure is relevant. Any other thoughts on food trucks? Alderman Fagan and then Alderman Jacobson.
Joellen, street vendors, people that sell, I know by the NIU, they had people selling hot dogs and, whatever. I know PJs used to do that, but I remember there was a gentleman who was doing corn over, the carts and everything. What's the cost on those?
What does NIU charge for those fees?
No, what does the city charge for those?
The city doesn't regulate food trucks on NIU property.
Not food trucks. Just, do we have anything that's for people that go out and sell their food out on the street or anything like that? Do we have any ordinances on that?
So like the farmer's market kind of thing?
Not necessarily. There was a...
are you talking like on Sycamore Road?
No, well, there was, they were over at 7th and Lincoln. There was some people there that was selling out of the carts and everything like that. Are you familiar with that at all?
If I can jump in on this one?
Yeah,
So for
please.
purposes of our code, that's considered a vehicle. The definition of vehicle in Chapter 33 of the city code includes motor vehicles, push carts, bicycle carts, or other devices used
Right.
to transport food, or any other mobile or portable device that's used in regulated activity.
So it would be the same?
It would be the same.
Okay. That's what I just wanted to know.
Thank you.
Alderman Jacobson, then Alderman Fanouken.
Again, I think it's important to reiterate a comment Joellen just made. There were several comments in the paper and in the blogs about how we had pushed all the food trucks out of NIU and that we weren't friendly and we weren't being progressive. We don't regulate the food trucks on NIU's campus. They are state property and they don't need a license or any sort of approval from the city to operate on NIU's campus. So the belief that we pushed those out, again, was not factual information. Also, in terms of the individual that made the comments saying, the city didn't help me. Again, I think it's important to state, we gave them free rent at the farmer's market and on that corner whenever they wanted to use that. We gave them free utilities, electricity on that corner whenever they wanted to use it. When the former tenant there, the popcorn stand, paid us rent for that location, the city bent over backwards to try to get a food truck vendor downtown to increase that foot traffic and that vibe by giving them those things free in this iteration. So again, I think there were several comments that the city, I certainly wish I would have been called, being that I was the council member on when we passed those ordinance changes, to say that the city didn't help and what wasn't aiding that business here, I think was an unfair targeting of the city. Can we do better? Again, there are some process improvements we can make to make it easier. But a lot of the facts stated in that article, and especially in the comments of that article, I felt were unfair and incorrect.
Thank you. Alderman Fanouken.
Well, just maybe a quick comparison, Joel Allen, if you could. You know, when we have Corn Fest, we have a number of out-of-town food vendors come in. Is there a licensing fee they pay the city, or is that just strictly for Corn Fest? And as a follow-up, how do we ensure that they're paying the sales tax they should?
I'm going to answer part of that and defer part of that question. It's because we have a lot of different types of applications that come in for different types of events. So at that point, we kind of go beyond just the food truck.
Right. But I'm just trying to make a comparison, because in a lot of ways, it's very similar, so.
Mm-hmm. So I don't think we charge individual fees to each one of those for an event, because it's part of the bigger event.
Okay.
But I do know that we do individual inspections, you know, the day of, when everything's set up. Chief Hicks and others go out to do inspections to ensure that basic life safety issues are met.
Mm-hmm. But what about, how do we ensure the sales tax is collected?
Janine's going to answer that.
Under the terms of the Corn Fest operating agreement, DCF, the DeKalb Corn Fest, is required to ensure that all the vendors do register and pay appropriate sales taxes. And from time to time in the past, we have had concerns be raised about that, and we've actually had finance department personnel go out and do some field work with vendors at the start of the festival to ensure that everything is properly set up and that they are capable and willing to remit all proper sales taxes. So
okay, so we could, in essence, as part of the application process, do a quick education piece on the sales tax of those food trucks as they come through, to better ensure that they're going to pay their fair share also.
I would actually go one step beyond that and say that the personnel we have in the finance department that are the frontline people that accept the applications and that work with applicants on them already do a very good job of educating. Any kind of license you come in, I know the people that we have in the finance department work with applicants and say, have you also looked at, you know, if you're looking at a liquor license, have you looked at the R&B tax registration? Have you looked at the different types of the fire life safety, the things you may need? So we already work proactively to identify those things and provide information to applicants.
All right, thank you.
What we're being asked tonight is simply to approve a resolution which would give the city the capability to beta test, if you will, during the rest of this summer and during the rest of this year, a different approach to dealing with food trucks. If there is consensus, and we will take a vote on this, we will then find out what is working, what perhaps needs to be tweaked, and then we would want to, at that point in time, change any standing ordinances to this. Did I get a motion on this?
Yes.
Okay, we do have a motion and a second.
I have another question, though.
Yes, Bill.
You mentioned that this is a temporary resolution, but I did not see a sunset date in here at all. And I wonder if we need to amend the resolution to include that.
So the ordinance, when we go to prepare an ordinance and you consider that ordinance, the ordinance would include the repeal of this resolution.
Well, I understand that.
Okay.
But let's say it takes longer than we anticipate, longer than the
Okay.
end of the year. That's why I'm suggesting that maybe we go ahead and put a end of the year end date on this resolution, so that, you know, if we just don't automatically roll it over beginning next year. That's my point.
Well, let me read what this says. This process shall remain in full force and effect until it is repealed or until it is superseded by the adoption of any update to Section 33.13 of the city code.
Right, but that does not give us an end date that would automatically sunset this if we have not taken any further action. That's my point. I'm looking so that it doesn't automatically roll over into next year. So I'd like to offer an amendment that this resolution has an end date of December 31st, 2018.
No, I'm sorry, I'm on going out of order.
No, you aren't. He made a motion.
I made a motion.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Now discussion on the proposed amendment. Alderman Fagan.
Yeah, you know, I get what you're saying, Bill, but, you know, the thing is, once that's got a sunset clause, then we've got to reinvent it next year. Nothing comes up next year. Then we've got to do it all over again. But we can adjust it next year.
But again, we're capable of doing that, but what I don't want it to do is just automatically roll over. This gives us some pressure to make sure we move forward on that ordinance change in the long term. That's my point here, that we just don't let it sit off to the side and don't take any action. Now we have to do something, or it reverts back to the old rules, which we're agreeing or not, have not been workable. That's my point here.
Alderman Jacobson.
Just a point of clarification, and only because I don't know the answer to this question. If I am a food truck operator and I am based in Aurora, and I come into DeKalb to sell my goods here, do I pay the sales tax to the city of DeKalb, or do I pay it to the city of Aurora, as that's where my commissary and my business is effectively?
There are different vendors that take different approaches to that, and there are different attorneys that would give you different opinions on that. For a lot of vendors, they look at the location of their home base as the location at which they quote-unquote receive orders.
And again, I think that's something we need to take into account to protect our local businesses. While I appreciate that there's probably lots of people that see DeKalb and NIU specifically as an opportunity to come out and sell, our local business owners are paying our local business fees and brick and mortar fees and local health inspection and local sales tax and all those things into the local entity to help support the local community, when a lot of the out-of-towners just simply aren't. And they see it as an opportunity to come mobile into our population center and take dollars out of our community. So I think that's something that I will certainly make an amendment on after Bill's goes up and down.
Okay.
Up or down.
Okay, let's vote on the amendment then. Yes, Attorney Frieders.
The only thing I would suggest the council consider is that you customarily cancel your second meeting in December, and the months leading up to that tend to be some of the busier meetings of the council. And it may make sense to look at either a slightly earlier or a slightly later time frame for your repealer date.
Well, but if the license is good till December 31st, then we certainly would not want to shorten that lifespan. So one at a later date, but again, do we then, push ourselves forward in the next year, getting into the food truck season? So I still think a December 31st is a reasonable date.
Okay. Roll call on the amendment, which puts an end date on this resolution to December 31, 2018. Roll call.
Fagan?
No.
Noriko?
No.
Verbic?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
6 yes.
Okay, let's go back to the original motion now. And I understand we're going to have another amendment. Is that right, David?
Correct. I'd like to amend the ordinance to read that only local businesses that are commissaried and located in DeKalb are eligible for the fee reduction. Down to the $50 annually.
Would you be in agreement to DeKalb County or DeKalb Sycamore area?
again, if we want to promote local businesses and they want to come in and work here, there are plenty of commissary spaces available. There are plenty of opportunities for them to come in and either find some space in DeKalb to work in the city of DeKalb to work out of, or find co-op commissary space, which I know of at least 2 that are open in DeKalb right now, and be profitable and be positive business owners in our community. Whether they're operating out of a brick and mortar or out of a truck, they will be DeKalb businesses that way.
Just for the sake of continuing discussion, I'll second his motion.
Further discussion, Alderman Norrico.
I have a question regarding administration. How much more difficult to manage this process will it be if community development has to make that kind of determination?
As Dean mentioned, and I'll defer to him to follow up if I misspeak, but the finance department is currently involved in accepting and processing and asking questions about all of these applications. And my assumption is under this program that would continue. I assume it would be a simple question on the form that would ask where the business is located and where they intend to pay their sales tax. I am not aware if they have an option to do that, but if we can, staff could research that and determine if it's possible for them to pay sales tax to the community if they are based out of a different community, and if that's the case, then we could try to follow up on that direction as well.
I would add to that, so we didn't anticipate that question, and I haven't researched a detailed answer to it. I do know several years back when we updated the peddler, solicitors, and itinerant merchant ordinance that this is a part of. We reviewed case law relating to municipalities that had established different standards for, as I recall correctly at that time, it was in-state and out-of-state peddler, solicitors, and itinerant merchants. And there was some case law indicating it was an equal protection violation to have a different standard for a merchant that was out-of-state versus in-state, arising under the federal constitution. I would suggest that we should probably review whether there's any similar concern with a in-city versus out-of-city. It's obviously a different standard and wouldn't invoke the federal concern likely, but we should likely review that if the council is intent on acting on it.
Alderman Verbeek.
May we require them to pay City of DeKalb sales tax?
The Internal Revenue Code and the regulations adopted by the Illinois Department of Revenue supersede even home rule authority, so we're given certain boundaries within which we can establish taxes. The location to which taxes are paid is something that has been the source of considerable litigation between the Department of Revenue, the state, and various home rule and non-home rule municipalities. So there are very few things that we can do without running afoul of some of the state law requirements, but that's certainly something we can look at in greater detail. What our code currently says with regard to these vehicles is that the operator shall report and pay sales taxes with such taxes being reported as originating within the city where required under applicable Illinois law, which again, when this was passed several years ago, looking at that question, we felt that was the fullest extent to which we could push that issue without running afoul of some of those limitations on home rule authority. But we're happy to look at that again if the council's interested.
That would be great if council would support that.
What was that, Mike?
To see if we could require them to pay DeKalb City sales tax.
Okay. Any other
Well,
comments?
just a comment.
All
I
in
guess.
favor?
So, I know that a lot of times the sales tax is paid at the point of sale in the location. I mean, that's why, the fuel sales office was in Sycamore, was to avoid sales tax from the RTA. But if you go into a McDonald's or if you go into a restaurant, you're going to pay sales tax in DeKalb even if you don't live in DeKalb. So it does seem kind of strange that we could have businesses come into DeKalb, sell in DeKalb, and not pay sales tax in DeKalb, but pay it to some other location. It's just a weird, just a comment that just seems very weird.
understanding that, if you think about, for example, the Schwann's delivery truck, in that case, the transaction is deemed to occur at their distribution center, wherever that may be located. So they're making a sale at that location and a delivery in the city, and there's some pretty clear precedence on that. This is not as clear. There isn't definitive guidance, which is why we suspect that different vendors are handling it differently.
Right. Yep.
I certainly respect the varying opinions of the city council tonight. I'm just afraid that if we were to put this restriction in, that it was DeKalb-only businesses, that we would put yet another roadblock up for businesses that wanted to come in, provide a service in the city of DeKalb.
Mayor?
But that's my thought, and we do have a motion to amend it with that restriction of DeKalb-only businesses. Dave, do you want to restate?
Again, the only difference would be the fee structure, that the DeKalb-only businesses would benefit from that $50 annual. Everyone else would have to pay the continuing amount of $50 a month. It would be the only thing that would, the only roadblock you're putting into place is to guarantee that the city is getting some revenues to protect, again, our businesses and our bottom line as the city.
Okay. Alderman Fagan.
All right, well, they had last year, October, just around the corner over here with the food trucks for one day. They're gonna have to pay that $50 for one day.
They would under either proposal anyway, unless we did a fee waiver. Either they're getting a monthly or they're getting an annual for $50.
Okay.
Any further discussion on this amendment? Alderman Noriko.
Since there seems to be some question whether there would be a legal challenge on this, can we table that amendment until we get, a more definitive legal opinion?
Are you asking Alderman Jacobson if he would be willing to withdraw his amendment?
Yeah, I guess I am.
I mean, I'd want to see this come back up at the next meeting. And my belief is that it's no different than the Park District. Non-residents pay more than residents to use the Park District services. It's how it works. And nobody's ever questioned it. And the reason is because the residents are paying taxes to support that Park District when the non-residents are not. So they have to pay a higher fee to come in and use the services that the residents are already paying for.
So is your amendment impacting only the upfront $50 fee and that discount?
Correct. It would be the difference of the upfront fee or the annual fee versus the monthly fees. I'd like to make sure that we keep our non-City of DeKalb vendors on a monthly. And again, I don't believe they should have to go through the approval process every month, but there should be some check to make sure, A, that they're paying their fair share, and B, that we can monitor what sort of business, if they're paying sales tax here or not. I think that gives us the opportunity to do that. But again, I don't believe that we should be opening up the doors necessarily to a lot of competition from outside of the city that will hurt our local businesses. I think if they want to do food trucks here and they want to use their brick and mortar or their existing commissary here as an outcropping of that business, wonderful, great. I'd love to support that and see that happen and see lots more of that. Beyond that, to allow the access to everyone to come in here very cheaply from out of town, I think is a mistake.
Yeah, I would even acquiesce to that a little bit, Dave, because most of these food trucks are going to be in business only 2 or 3 or 4 months, probably. So it's not like it's an extraordinary amount of money. Yeah, Joe Ellen.
Mayor and Council, a comment and a clarification. The comment, again, keep in mind this is a beta test. This is a resolution. This isn't the law. The purpose of us bringing this forward at this time, I mean, we were kind of testing all of these things, moving forward before we brought it to you anyway. Now, this is just a more formal process to let everybody know what's going on. we can monitor these very things that you're concerned about, report back on them. How many food trucks do we get that are from out of town? What was our experience? What did we learn? We can then advise the council about that experience prior to the adoption of an ordinance. So everything that you're commenting about, we can take a look at and address through the temporary ordinance.
Yeah.
The other clarification I want to make, and I'm going to look to Dean to correct me if I'm wrong, but the two different things in the resolution. One regulates special events and the fees that go along with that. On the second page of the resolution, item number 3, it says the mayor shall be authorized and directed to approve food and beverage special event licenses with the recommendation of city staff. The license may include the requirement that the applicant pay a fee in an amount specified by the mayor intended to cover the city's actual costs for the inspection. So I forget who asked the question about if they're there for one day, do they pay the $50? That gives the mayor the ability to take into consideration under this resolution only, so only for this summer, what that fee would be. On the standalone operation, so item B in the resolution, that's where we get into the is it $50 or what are we looking at and what period of time does it cover? Because those are the ones that come in for a longer period of time.
I think the fact that we put a date certain on the end of this provisional period means that we absolutely need to get some consensus or lack of same on Alderman Jacobson's amendment. So, Dave, would you just state in one clear sentence what your amendment says?
In terms of letter B, standalone operation, I would like to see a separate fee structure for in-town operators as opposed to out-of-town operators. And whether that's put on the inspection charge or the application fee, whichever way that it makes sense and may be legal to do, but that there is a separate charge for in-town operators that are operating in the city and out-of-town operators. That's a fair charge. Again, I don't know if the $50 a month is necessarily fair. We can review that.
Yeah.
But that there is an upcharge based on those coming from out of town to do business in the city of DeKalb.
Good. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Roll call on the amendment. Excuse
Just
me.
before
Yeah.
we have a roll call, so I'm not sure if this motion passes how, it doesn't have a specified fee associated with it. I'm not sure how we would enforce the will of the council if the will of the council is to pass this. Because the motion as stated is that there be a different, if what you're proposing is that businesses that are from outside of the corporate limits of the city are going to pay the existing fee structure, then that would be something definite that we could enforce. But if it's just that they're going to pay a different fee without greater specificity, we won't be able to enforce whatever the direction of the council is.
Again, I think that's a separate discussion of what we feel that fee is valid. Right now, it's at $600 a year. If they were doing an annual, I would say to leave it at the $50 a month and allow those operators to decide whether or not they want to come and operate for the full year here or for partial time of the year here. I don't feel that the $50 a month is unduly burdensome, especially, I mean, it's $2 a day. I don't think that's unreasonable to operate here. It certainly costs more to open a brick and mortar, no matter what your rent is in DeKalb.
What Dean was asking was if we put that $50 a month in, then you're fine with it.
We're happy to do whatever the council's will is. We just want to make sure that we know what that will is. So if it is to use the existing fee structure for businesses that aren't operating directly out of, or are not home-based in DeKalb.
Home-based here.
You're comfortable with that, David?
Yes.
Okay.
To leave it at the $50 a month rate for those businesses as an incentive. If you want to do business here, come and it's $500 off your rent here to come and operate in DeKalb and locate your business in DeKalb.
Or $150 if you want to do it for 3 months.
Yep.
Roll call.
Provided, of course, it is deemed legal once we do the research.
Noriko?
No.
Verbic?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
7 yes.
So moved. Okay, thank you, Joellen.
We
That
still
was
have
the amendment.
the,
We gotta do
That's
that.
right, we have,
We're in the
We do
underlying
thank you,
still.
but
One more roll.
how quickly I forget, right? Okay, any further discussion on the original motion?
as amended.
Roll call.
Verbic?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
Number one now.
Okay, now, for those of you following at home or in the audience,
Out of the audience.
if we go back now to items for separate action, item G,
Oh, you have to jump up.
we are now under what is listed on your page as number 1. It becomes number 2, and that is ordinance 2018-019, amending Chapter 14 rooming houses by adding Section 1422, Greek housing fire safety. This would be first reading. Motion.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Our Fire Chief, Eric Hicks, is going to speak to this item. Eric?
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and staff. I'm going to present this also tonight with Director Charlton. She has some information to provide. Up for your consideration tonight is an ordinance that would amend Chapter 14, rooming houses, by adding a section titled Greek Housing Fire Safety under Chapter 14.22. If approved, there would be a clear definition of what Greek housing is and the timelines for the installation of the sprinkler system. And additionally, tonight, Director Charlton will be discussing the possibility of some city-funded financial assistance and a possible associated fee waivers. From the council's direction at the March 21st staff meeting, or council meeting, staff has been working with NIU Greek organizations, the Greek Row Identified Property Owners, and DARA, through its president, Glenn Rovey, to become compliant with a state law passed in 2012, which requires Greek residential structures to be retrofitted with fire suppression systems by January 1st, 2019. To date, all known Greek organizations with additional housing recognized by NIU have been contacted, are in the plans for making plans to retrofit their properties with Greek sprinklers. If I can get Byron to pull up the map, you guys already got it up. So I'm going to give you a quick update from our last meeting on the property status. So currently, 930 Normal Road is up for sale and remaining single family. 1024 Hillcrest, 934, and 930 Greenbrier, which is the trifat, has opted out, will not need Greek sprinklers as they are no longer going to provide housing to the Greek community. There's 11 properties that are planning on remaining Greek, and they are going to request some type of city assistance. And those would be 3 properties on Hillcrest, 6 on Greenbrier, 1 on Kimberly, and 1 on Blackhawk. Currently 2 properties, 928 Hillcrest and 1203 Blackhawk, will remain Greek, but they are not requesting any assistance from the city at this time, and they're in the process of completing the projects on their own. I'm very proud of the collaboration we've had, and a considerable amount of time was spent with the stakeholders on coming up with a fair definition of what a Greek facility is. So there's basically 6 categories of the definition. So Greek housing is defined as a rooming house, apartment, or other residential structure that provides housing for a Greek organization, whether or not such structure provides for activities other than housing. So here's the 6. The structure is owned or leased by a Greek organization and is used for housing by any members. The structure is recognized by any accredited public or private university as providing housing to a Greek organization or as being their housing location. The structure would have 8 or more members of a single Greek organization reside within the structure. And they also could have 50% more of the occupancy of the structure as stated in the rooming house language. So, for example, if the rooming house was licensed for 6 and they had three Greek members listed in it, that would also classify as Greek housing. I want to note the definition is not inconsistent with other university towns, and this language was crafted with a lot of input from DARA President Glenn Roby. And that was done so to make sure that the property owners would have assurance that their investment with sprinklers be less likely to result in people moving to apartments or smaller homes and be converted to rooming houses. Also included in the ordinance is a deadline extension for those properties that are in the process of sprinkling their properties but may not do so by January 1st of 2019. The Director of Community Development would have the authority to approve those extensions if a substantial amount of work was completed by that date. Also included in the language, if a landlord learns they have a Greek organization residing in their property and they do not know it, they would not need to immediately sprinkle that property. They would basically have 12 months to make amends. Also, if they did have that happen to them, they would only have this happen to them one time in a 5-year rolling period. Otherwise, that property would be obligated to install Greek sprinklers. So I'm going to let's turn this over to Director Charlton to talk about some of the financial considerations prior to answering any questions.
Thank you. We are tag teaming this tonight, as Chief Hicks indicated. So he talked about the ordinance that's before you for consideration for formal adoption. What I'm going to talk to you about is something that we did come up and talk to you at the last meeting, and that would be some of the financial incentives that we could make available. And specifically, you asked us to do a little bit more research, talk to the folks that were involved, find out what those estimates would cost, and therefore be able to determine the impact on the city's water fund. So keep in mind, the last time we talked, it would be our intent to fund this assistance program out of the city's water fund. I have talked to our finance director, Molly Talkington, about the health of the water fund, and she's confident that the amounts that we're looking at can be covered in the terms that I'm going to go through. But again, it's our water fund. It's there to cover our water services. So making these types of loans available does come with a risk that we may have something come up that we don't anticipate. So I do want the council to be aware of that. The last time we did talk, the council, I think staff threw out an 80% loan. So if we have a $100,000 project, we wanted to have the property owners have $20,000 skin in the game, and that we would fund through this loan program the remaining 80%. I also heard a couple people comment during that discussion 50%. So the information that was provided in your packet looks at both a 50% loan program and an 80% loan program. Chief Hicks mentioned that there are 11 properties that are interested in participating that are known Greek facilities that we've been in contact with. On pages 4 and 5, you can see the addresses of those Greek facilities. I want to point out that the total cost estimates are still very preliminary at this point. A lot of them are contacting different contractors about both the inside and the outside work, and as of the writing of this report, this is the best information. But it's good because I think it kind of represents that conservative, so it's giving you the highest that we think it could be and the impact that it would have on our water fund. The interesting thing, if you look at the interest to the city, on page 5 of the document, you can see how much the interest the city would generate both on the 50% and the 80%. And that is based on the terms that were recommended by our finance director, Molly Talkington. So she did look at the amounts that we received, and based on that loan amount, it's recommended that we do a 5-year loan term. And she was suggesting a 0.5% above prime, which again, at the time of the writing of this report was 4.75, so we're recommending a 5.25% interest rate. Chief Hicks also mentioned that one of the things the council could consider is a fee waiver. Again, we want to encourage the owners and make it possible for them to comply with this program. We're not proposing to waive actual physical costs, so any physical costs for the water meter or any actual costs that the city incurs to send out our contractual inspector or a plumbing inspector would not be included in the fee waiver, but any of the other permit fees would. And again, the total fee that could be waived would depend on what size service they need, how many sprinkler heads they have, so it's very specific to their individual property. But I did give some examples on page 5 of the report. Just to note, that specific thing is included in the ordinance, so if that's not something you are interested in waiving, we would need to have an amendment to the ordinance included with your vote tonight. Again, as Eric indicated, this has been a very long and involved process involving many community groups, students, NIU. We've incorporated DARA through its president, Glenn Roby, who I think I saw here. Yep. So he might be able to answer any questions the council might have. We do recommend that you consider approving the proposed ordinance. We're getting close to school is out and construction season is upon us. This is the best time for those folks to get into those buildings and start making those improvements. So if you approve the ordinance tonight, it's typically on first reading. You have the option to approve it on second reading as well. If you provide us with consensus on the items that I've listed on page 6, which are 1, to use the water fund to provide the loans, is that a yes or a no? Are you interested in covering 50% or 80% of the total project costs? And third, do you agree that the term of 5 years and 5.25% is agreeable? The only other thing I want to mention, and we talked about special service area, so the owners that we've spoken to about this program are advised that at a minimum we would use special service area as a backup to this program. So if they default on their loan, we would have that to go back to. Some owners may be interested in having us set up the special service area, which would be 11. So we'd come back to you with 11 separate action items if that's how they choose to proceed. And we think it's appropriate to give the owners the choice to do that. I know there's different people have different tax statuses that they fall within, so we might want to offer them an opportunity to tell us which one works best for them. Our finance directors told us it's less administrative work for us just to process the loan and get paid twice a year and hopefully never have to go to a special service area backup. But again, if the owner feels strongly that that's something that will help them, that's something that the council could also consider. So I'm happy to answer, or Chief Hicks is happy to answer, and again, we have Glenn Roby in the room if there's any questions for him specifically.
Before we turn it over to a council discussion, I know a couple of people want to speak to this. Glenn Roby, you're first up, and then David, you want to speak also? Okay. So Glenn?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Those of you that may have spoken for this group before, so Glenn Roby, resident of the city of DeKalb, and owner of a property in the Greek Row area, or Annie Glidden North, as it is affectionately referred to. I'm also on the Annie Glidden North Task Force. Want to say first my thanks to Chief Hicks and Joelle and Charlton for their work with us. I'm also the DeKalb Area Rental Association president, otherwise known as DARA, and we've kind of crafted some of the language here, and they've been very supportive and very transparent in all of our discussions about how we craft language that would help the owners. I also represent 4 of the 11 groups that are seeking some sort of relief as it relates to these sprinkler systems. We know that the area is troubled. We know that there's some challenges in the neighborhood and instability of the Greek organizations. Having some assistance from the city would allow these owners to reinvest in the property to meet a state requirement. It would be very beneficial for them to work through these tough economic times with the and keep the Greek students in that neighborhood. When we were working with the, drafting the language, we also wanted to ensure that there was not going to be flight out of that neighborhood, which is a huge concern. That landlords just would not reinvest in those properties and potentially have students not having housing for the back half after January 1st. So this program, which we collectively work together on, is one which addresses the needs of the owners of the property, provides some incentive and some support from the city, and help stabilize that neighborhood. So a lot of what you're doing needs to look beyond just the financial, but also the fact that there is a percentage above the normal interest rate, so there would be some payback to the city for allowing this to happen. So there's no, I guess, burden to the taxpayers. There's money being paid back. It stabilizes that neighborhood, which desperately needs it, and also provides an opportunity to support the students that do live in that area. There is also a piece of it too that allows that if there's significant work or things that are underway, to allow the deadline to go a little past January 1st, which is also important because trying to get these things with all these contractors coming in over the summer, and I think I spoke to this the last time I was here, can be challenging. It certainly is challenging. There's a lot to be done, both from the excavation, from the street, the water supply to the building, and then obviously running the pipes up and down the building. So allowing some extra time for that would be also very helpful to the owners and least impactful to the students that would reside in these buildings. So I give my full-throated support to the efforts and the proposal as presented to you, and I'm open for any questions.
Okay, David, any questions of Glenn at this point? David Jacobson.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn.
Dave Jacobson, First Ward. Again, being a property owner on Greek Row, I've had to separate myself from the discussion privately with you all, but I do have some public comments that I think are important to keep in mind for your decision making. I think it's important to remember that this isn't a deferred maintenance item. I know I've had some discussion with some community members effectively saying, well, the owners didn't put them in and now they're asking the city to come forward. It's an unfunded mandate that was placed on the owners by the state. I think it is certainly an appropriate use of our water fund, being again that we're not giving the money to the property owners as any sort of abatement or incentive that they wouldn't be responsible for. It's merely offering them a loan, which is very difficult to come by in the private banking industry at the moment. Going through the sale of my property that would be affected right now, I know the owners have reached out to the banks and had the discussion, and at least anecdotally from their standpoint, again, the banks are finding it very difficult to lend on effectively an losing words today for certain, a non-collateralized loan on the systems that you effectively couldn't repossess if the owners didn't pay. Again, I think the interest should be up for debate. If the council believes that 5.25% is a fair amount. Again, if it were economic development in any other portion of the city, especially downtown or Park 88, the owner would likely be asking us to give them that money as an incentive. In this case, the owners aren't asking for any sort of free money. They're asking merely that the city provide them a 5-year payback. I would imagine from my conversations with many of the landlords affected that they will prefer to put them on their tax bills. The reality is the tax benefit of that as a fully deductible annual expense is significantly more attractive to most owners than depreciating the capital expense over 38 or 40 years of commercial value. I would also implore the council again to consider the 80% number. At a 50% level, it will likely require many of the owners to go out and get a second loan from a bank to cover that extra 30% gap. Again, when you're talking $50,000 or $60,000 in upfront expense for a project, to come up with half of that amount in many of these properties that have been under-rented and certainly in terms of bed rent, under-rented for many years is going to be very difficult for these owners. I think the city has stepped up, albeit late, on this one. and we can get ourselves into a position that we can ensure the success of this program if we move forward very quickly. The owners are on board, they're getting their quotes. I have reached out to several of them as a private owner directly to help try to coordinate some of these projects. But we need the city's direction at this point to understand what the future looks like for us as property owners. So we appreciate you taking it up today, and I appreciate if you can consider waiving it or waiving second reading tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Before I turn it over back to Eric or Joellen for any answers to our questions, are there any questions or comments from City Council regarding this? Alderman Verbeek.
While I would certainly entertain a waiver of fee and a flexible deadline, I think my neighbor to the right, to my right here, Kate Noriko, said in the first meeting tonight, we're not a bank. And my worry is that we really restrict ourselves from any potential economic development if we tie up dollars in this program. I understand the thought, but at the same time, 2012 was 7 years ago. I'm not sure that the owners owned the properties back in 2012, but in my view, there's been ample time to prepare for what was certainly an unfunded mandate. I get that part, but prepare to get those installed over time, I think was possible.
Alderman Noriko.
I have a question about the 8 or more members figure in terms of how that matches up with the state requirement. I recall that there was some question in how people who lived in, the rooming house, Greek facility were to be counted, but
if you read the true intent of the law, it says 2 or more. Okay. But we are working on a system, just like Champaign did, to make it equitable for our citizens and residents.
okay.
Alderman Fagan.
Okay, just make it certain here that what we're going to be voting on tonight is not has anything to do with the fees or the loan. It's just that these things have to be done by, right? I mean, we're not voting on fees or loan.
That's
right?
correct, no
fees. You're going to bring
fees.
that to us on another time, okay?
I'm sorry. The ordinance does include the fee waiver.
You're right.
Okay.
You're right. All right. I'm all for it. I'm all for voting yes for this. My opinion on loan out of the water department, our water loan. I agree. We are not a bank. We are not here to loan money to anyone, but it's a double-edged sword here. It needs to be done. Banks aren't going to loan the money. And the other thing is, we don't want flight. Because if this happens, if this does not happen, what are we going to be dealing with later? Okay? And the other thing is SSA. SSA, I'm all for SSAs. As a matter of fact, when we talk about Anglin North, I get a lot of feedback and saying, why are we paying for Anglin North when I live over here on the south side of town? Different thing. That's a different issue. But what I'm saying is SSA might be another thing to look at also on this. So that's where I stand.
Any other comments? Alderman Fanouken.
If we waive all the suggested fees, what does that cost to the city?
So in plan review fees at $500 a piece.
Yeah, I
times
mean,
11,
that's
that'd be
5,500 right there, but, you have all the other fees you're suggesting, too.
Right, and part of those are dependent on how big of a service they need
Right.
and how many sprinkler
All right.
heads.
Well, I'm
they
just
would-
looking then, you talk about recovering the interest at $50,000, but, probably 20 to 25% of that will be eaten up by waiving the fees. I'm not against waiving the fees per se, but I'd like to have, you know, us recover some of those costs some way, and the interest is a great way to do it. I don't mind being the bank, particularly if we go with the guarantee through it being paid through an SSA. I think that would assuage some of the worries about the owner going up, because even if they turn around and sell, then it stays with the property. So.
Correct. Alderman Marquardt.
So, since we're going through the questions, I'm fine with waiving the fees. I would be fine with just prime for the interest rate. You wouldn't necessarily have to go above it, but that's fine with me if we go above it. 80% of the cost is good for me too, so that we can get this done. And since it's not in a TIF district, water fund would be fine to use. And once again, I back the SSA to cover the city to get the payments back. And from an accounting standpoint, it does make better sense for running a business that, from their standpoint, to do it that way, if they think about it.
Let's segue that in before we get off those 4 questions and get some consensus for the benefit of Joellen and Eric. Is there consensus that we should use the water fund?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Is there, should the loans cover, how many would favor the 50% as opposed to the 80?
50.
50.
50, 50, 80?
80.
80. You have any thoughts? No thoughts? Okay. Can we leave it a little nebulous on that?
We need to be prepared to come back with the financial information.
Okay. How many, you prefer 80?
But I could live with
Yeah.
50.
50, 80, 50, so we got
We're
2
kinda-
50s,
we're
2 80s.
split.
You guys don't care, or?
Well, the problem, as resident David Jacobson stated, was that if we only go at 50%, that may not be enough to complete the project. We're still right back in the same point where they can't go to a bank and get a loan.
Right.
So I'm in agreement with I would do 80%, I would do 5 1/4 as it's been presented. The SSA, I'm fine with. Waiving the fees, I'm fine with.
Okay.
But, obviously the percentage is a little bit higher than the bank. We were hoping that we would encourage people to go to the bank. Now we're hearing the bank probably won't fund these loans or won't give loans for these projects. So if we go 80% and 5 1/4, a little bit higher percentage, a little bit higher interest rate.
Mike, you care to commit yourself
I'm fine with that.
with the 80? Okay,
Yeah,
so
with the
there's
backing of an
consensus.
SSA.
Yeah, there seems to be consensus
Yeah,
at 80.
I could live with the 80. That'd
Yeah,
be fine.
okay, good. All right. And I think there's consensus that the term of 5 years and 5 1/4 would be good, and waiving of the fees would be fine.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, are there any further questions of council?
Just need action on the ordinance
Yes,
and whether
right.
it's waiver on second.
And we do have a motion on that, do we not, Ruth?
Yes.
Okay. Hearing no further question, roll call.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson? Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
7 yes.
Thank you.
I'd
Eric.
like to move that we waive second reading and approve this evening.
Second?
Been moved and seconded that we waive second reading and move forward on this. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
7 yes.
Yeah, I realize realize time is of the essence, and I appreciate all the work you guys have put into this.
I want to thank you on behalf of the property owners. I know a lot at home watching tonight to see how this goes, because they're anxious to get started. So I've been in contact with them this week, so.
Good. Thank you. Okay, let's move right along. Item number 2, as printed 2, it's actually our third ordinance consideration tonight, and that is ordinance 2018-020, prohibiting the use of groundwater as a potable water supply by the installation or use of the potable water supply wells or by any other method within a certain area in the city of DeKalb. This is first reading. We have some background provided. We know who this is, where it is, and Joellen Charlton is going to tell us all about it.
Last one. Mayor and Council, this is an ordinance that's presented for your consideration at the request of the owners of In Bowdens, located 1106 and 1110 North 1st Street. They've asked the city to adopt this ordinance that would ban the use of groundwater wells within roughly 750 feet of the property, as is shown in the exhibit. Accomplishing this will allow them to attain a no further remediation letter from the Illinois EPA using the tiered approach to cleanup objectives. I think everybody's familiar with this property. The northern half of this building used to be occupied by a dry cleaners, and as a result of that use, there, as is common in a lot of dry cleaners, there are chemicals related to the dry cleaning business that often get released into the ground area and then become subject to phase 1 and phase 2 environmental remediation. The owners, with the help of their consultants, I think David Lutz, are you here tonight? Yep. From Stantec Consulting has done a lot of the cleanup work and has also modeled the property for compliance with those standards that tell you how far they need to provide notice for the groundwater ordinance. And again, that figure came back with 750 feet. So if this ordinance is approved tonight, that consultant will specifically notify each landlord within that radius that the council approved this ordinance and that groundwater wells would be not be allowed. We did do a search of the records that we have and found that there was one, or we're aware that there's one well that had been previously located in the area, and it was actually on the dry cleaning property itself. That well was capped recently, as indicated in the attached sealing form that was included with your agenda materials. The council has the authority to pass this ordinance. We have passed a few of these in the past. We are aware, Tim Haldeman, Public Works Director, advised me that we have another that may be coming forward shortly. So I think it's potentially a good sign. It means that people are taking actions to obtain these letters, which sometimes can relate into or convert into other economic development opportunities. So if anybody has any questions for me or for Mr. Lutz, who is in the audience, we'd be happy to answer them for you.
Before we turn it over, do we have a motion yet, Ruth?
No.
Okay, I entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Now open it up to discussion. Alderman Fagan.
Nobody will be building a well out here. I mean, that's all in city limits. I mean, no one can they?
Right, I asked that question too. We already have a code on the books that says
Right.
you can't have city wells.
Right.
So what it doesn't do is for anybody that has a well, existing, that they might not be able to continue using it.
But the only person that does is Mr. Inboden himself.
According to our research, yes.
All right, thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Roll call.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Markwart,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion that we waive
Thank you.
second reading and approve this evening.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that we waive second reading on this. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Markwart,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
8 yes.
Moving right along, number 3 on your agenda, ordinance 2018-021, authorizing an amendment to ordinance 1996-033 to add permitted and special uses to the properties located at 850, 890, and 930 Pappas Drive, and to add language that the LC Light Commercial District regulations in the Unified Development Ordinance shall be used if not covered in the Plan Development Agreement. Motion.
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Before we turn it over for questions, we have our principal planner, Dan Olson, to speak to this item. Dan?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is a proposed amendment to ordinance from 1996 regarding 3 commercial properties, southwest corner of Annie Glenn Road and Hillcrest Drive. 850 Pappas Drive has Jimmy John's and a laundromat. 890 is Lucalo's, and 930 is Rosati's restaurant. The ordinance at that time didn't include a list of permitted and special uses, so city initiating a petition right now to clear that up, to add a list of uses that would go on in the future. So it's very clear what would be allowed on that site. In the past, I assume it would, the general commercial district or light commercial district was used, but there is a little difference between those 2 districts in terms of what uses are permitted and special uses. So we use a light commercial district as a guideline. That's the most predominant commercial district in that area. There is a couple of properties zoned general commercial. So we used the LC list from the UDO as a guideline. There's a few changes that you'll see in the amendment. That's Exhibit A to the ordinance. A few uses we removed based on the fact that the lot size or building configuration or use we probably wouldn't want to see out there. Hotels, public utility facilities, theaters, car washes, and gas stations are removed. Medical clinics is a list in the special use in the LC district. We added that as a permitted use. That's a use that's been mentioned in the AGN discussions as a use that's probably needed out there, so we put that in as a permitted use. Also, daycare centers is a permitted use. We added some other uses very similar to that, which are mentioned in discussions on AGN 2 that are needed in that area. Preschools, learning centers, after-school facilities, those are permitted uses also. The owners of the 3 properties have approved of the list. All the uses there are permitted uses in that LC district, and approving this ordinance will not create a non-conforming situation. The Jimmy John's does have a drive-through that was permitted a few years ago through another restaurant, but that is also allowed there. The Planning and Zoning Commission conducted a hearing on April 18th. They voted 4-0 to recommend approval of the permitted use list and special use list as noted on Exhibit A, and also amended the ordinance to add the LC district in case something else is missing in the ordinance, and we'll go back to the LC district for any other regulation. So we recommend approval of the ordinance as prepared. The city's a petitioner, but also recommending waiver of second reading on this item.
The mayor asked me to, while he's absent for a moment, if anyone wishes to speak. I guess it goes to discussion. And we can discuss. Anyone? Suppose we should wait for the mayor to get back.
Dan, you have any further comments on the property, or?
No, it's just kind of a cleanup item, so I think once we get this approved, and the important part is the owners did approve of the list, so, and it won't create any non-conforming situation, so we're not creating a situation where we're going to run into problems if they, you know, want to continue, so.
No further discussion? Roll call.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson, Fanouken,
Yes.
Markwart,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
7 yes.
Motion to waive second reading?
Second.
Been moved and seconded that we waive second reading on this ordinance amendment. Roll call.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Markwart,
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
7 yes.
Okay, moving right along. Ordinance number 5, again, this was our 6th consideration tonight. Ordinance 2018-023, amending Chapter 24 Building Code for miscellaneous text amendments. Our first reading, motion.
Mayor,
We
skipped ordinance 2018-022, number 4.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Okay, we'll back up to item number 4 in the printed agenda. This is our 5th ordinance consideration tonight. Ordinance 2018-022, authorizing amendments to Planned Development Ordinance 2017-028 to eliminate the requirement for a commercial kitchen and amend the final plans regarding the parking lot, handicap accessibility, and landscaping for 1114 Blackhawk Road, which is the Sigma Nu fraternity. First reading, motion.
So moved.
Second?
Been moved and seconded. Now, I'm going to ask our principal planner, Dan Olson, to also speak to us on this item.
Thank you. About a year ago, the council approved an ordinance rezoning the site to planned development residential to allow the Sigma Nu fraternity to locate in the building, up to 45 residents. Residents moved in late 2017. There was a temporary certificate of occupancy issued. During that time, there's a few items that had to be addressed regarding a new accessible lift and replacing all the doors, which has been done and inspected. Also, they were submitted a zoning application to eliminate the commercial kitchen requirement, which was in that ordinance that the council approved. They also amended requesting amendment to the final plan. There's some adjustments regarding the parking, sidewalks, and the landscaping, which I'll go over. So the ordinance did require a commercial kitchen. Basically, the residents all of them have chosen the meal plan through the university, so they don't need the commercial kitchen requirements. So there was some detail in there in terms of what they had to put in for the commercial kitchen, and there's a list in the packet that shows what was required, and they have a kitchen in there now. So they do have the sink, the microwave oven, 2 of them, toaster oven, refrigerator, freezer, and work tables, and 3 sinks. The commercial kitchen required the oven and the fire suppression Ansel system. So that was removed. That's what they're requesting to be taken out. So they'll still have areas for the residents to prepare meals and to store the meals. As they were working on the site, there was a few changes regarding the site. The handicap accessible parking was moved to the north because they changed the location where the handicap sidewalk would go. It enters in the west side of the building next to Blackhawk Road, so they moved the handicap spaces. The relocated sidewalk affected a few of the trees that were to go in there. So we took a look at it with the applicant, worked with them to see what was most beneficial for the landscaping to go. So they're going to add, instead of 4 trees on the site, they're going to add 2 street trees in the right-of-way on Blackhawk. One is replacing a tree that is dying, and another one is going in the tree that was removed a couple years ago. And then they're also placing a new street tree on Kimberly Drive at a location where that access into the site was relocated, and they actually had to move a tree, so they're going to replace that tree. Also, we are requiring, there's a note on the plan, that the existing vegetation on the east side of the site, which is next to the city-owned 912 Edgebrook, is going to be trimmed a little bit more. Public Works has done some trimming to open that visibility between the 2 sites, which the police department has requested. So there's a note that some additional trimming will be done upon the department approval, and the applicant has agreed to that. The commission conducted a hearing on April 18th. They voted 4-0 to recommend approval of the amendment to the commercial kitchen and the final plan as presented. We do have a request from the applicant, Stephen Remersky, with the fraternity is here. They're requesting waiver of second reading. There's a letter in your packet requesting such. So if you have any questions, I certainly could answer those along with Stefan.
Alderman Alderman Fanouken.
Dan, with the changes in the handicapped accessibility, it still meets all the requirements of the ADA?
Yes, they have 2 spaces on the north end, and the sidewalk is accessible as along with the lift. So it does meet all the ADA requirements.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Roll call.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Markwart,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
8 yes.
Entertain a motion on waiving of second reading.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on that? Roll call.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Markwart,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you.
I understand that we can now move to ordinance 2018-023, amending Chapter 24 Building Code for miscellaneous text amendments. Motion.
So moved.
Second?
Been moved and seconded. Speaking to this item is our Chief Building Official, Thaddeus Mack. That
Summarize the document that you have before you. Previous versions of the code, so the 2003 ICC series of codes, which would have included the residential and commercial code, had certain amendments to them that amended work that is specifically exempted from a permit just in the base version of those codes. It's not uncommon for a community such as this to amend to fit specific needs or desires within that. When the City of DeKalb adopted the 2015 current version of these codes, none of those amendments were carried over to it. So some of the practice that I had discovered upon being hired here was that there was still some verbiage of those codes being used, of those exemptions being used, but I didn't find that to be the case within what we had presently adopted. So I had approached the Building Code Board of Appeals, discussed if that was a purposeful thing. If so, great, I can enforce it. If it was done in error, then I need to take steps to correct that. They had indicated that was done in error, and they wanted to have some of those brought back in. While doing review on what those codes and amendments previously were, what the codes currently state, and then also what information is contained within the UDO, I wanted to try to align those 3 things into one cohesive document that would be consistent between both residential and commercial, but would also give a little bit more freedom and flexibility for smaller projects that I didn't feel needed permits as were previously required in certain codes. So what you have before you tonight is reflective of 2 meetings with the Building Code Board of Appeals, as well as their votes and recommendations based on what I had thought was a reasonable approach to this. So this has been voted on by them at our April 5th meeting, and they had asked me to bring this forward tonight for council consideration.
any questions of Thaddeus? Roll call.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Markwart,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
8 yes.
Are you requesting waiver of second reading?
If everybody's open to it, I would.
No, make that request, wait a second reading.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Markwart,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you, Thad.
Thank you very much.
Let's move along. Item number 6 on your agenda. It's actually the 7th ordinance consideration tonight. Ordinance 2018-024, amending Chapter 51 Traffic. Schedule C, Parking Prohibited. Subsection 36, No Parking at Any Time, Tow Zone. And subsection 53, No Parking 2 a.m. to 6 a.m., Tow Zone. First reading. Motion.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Here speaking to the item is our Police Chief, Gene Lowry.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Again, this is in regard to the Safe Streets Initiative. We're bringing the Phase 3 ordinance to your attention. Just as a reminder, this will be the 8th time we have discussed the Safe Streets Initiative with Council, so I am sure you're probably well inundated with information regarding this. I'm going to try and keep this as brief as I can. I want to get to a slide here that will get us right to the Phase 3 discussion. And again, this slide is just for general information purposes only. This is information you've had in the past. The only thing that really stands out as a difference with this slide is some of that you've seen in the past, although you have seen this one before, is the 6 badge symbols that are in the highlighted or GPS blowout view are 6 confirmed shootings from 2017. You may also recall that combined with the area of about 6 square blocks, there were 21 confirmed shootings over in the Enniglin North neighborhood in 2017. In regard to the third phase of 4 phases, this really boils down to, I guess for me to put it quite simply, and I would encourage Attorney Frieders to add anything should he choose, but in Safe Streets, Phase 3, we're really looking at establishing no parking zones from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. west of Annie Glidden Road. This ordinance that's before you tonight is only in regard to Phase 3, and its implementation would be much in line with what's already been implemented in Phase 1. We have not gone through the implementation measures in Phase 2 yet because we have some signage and material delivery we're waiting on and some things of that nature. We also intend on bringing an amendatory ordinance to you to clear up some inconsistencies we have with the old ordinance, much like we did with Phase 1. The deeper we go, it seems the more we uncover some of the old old ordinances that are in conflict. So we want to get all those things tidied up before we begin enforcement. Of course, the media campaign, community outreach goes with that as well. I really don't have anything else to say, but I want to kick you over to a slide that kind of, I think, spoke volumes the last time we presented on Phase 3 and 4 at the Cow. And there's only 3 pictures I have with me tonight in regard to this. The area that I think I had the most concern about west of Annie Glidden was the Varsity neighborhood. These were drone shots taken in early morning on a Monday morning, the first day of finals week. I could leave it at that one for now. And I'd be prepared to answer any questions you might have in regard to Phase 3.
Any questions or comments? The lack of same, I think, suggests what you said, Gene, that we've looked at this, we've studied the material.
I think this might be a little like water torture. One drip at a time.
Roll call, please.
Markwart,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko? Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
8 yes.
Okay.
Mayor, motion to waive second reading?
Second?
Been moved and seconded that we waive second reading on this. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Markwart,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you, Gene.
Thank you, Council.
Okay, let's see what we can do now with some resolutions. The first one being Resolution 2018-056, authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with Illinois Century Network for lead service and associated monthly fees in an amount not to exceed $330.70. Motion.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Here with more information on this is our IT Director, Mark Thorson.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Just a point of clarification. The title change was made, and that should read $4,000 annually. The original title was $330.70 monthly.
Yeah, right.
But under advisement, we changed it to an annual for the title of this agenda item. But we're bringing forth tonight a request for an intergovernmental agreement with Illinois Century Network for lead service and associated fees. Some background information: Illinois Century Network is a department of the state of Illinois in the Department of Innovation and Technology. They're also the conduit to provide that lead service. Leads, as also some background, is the ability for law enforcement here at the city of DeKalb to be able to access criminal databases both at a state level and at the national level. As you may recall, on March 12th, at the regular city council meeting, we had brought before you an intergovernmental agreement with Northern Illinois University to replace the existing Leeds connection. This is the second piece to that. We have to have an agreement with the state of Illinois in order to be able to access that system through that connection. And as a point from earlier at the past meeting, we had mentioned that there was going to be no fee with this new connection. However, as we were progressing through this and spoke with the state, we found out that information was not correct, and so we tried to make an effort to alert council to this, and we also wanted to bring it up in this memo. We had budgeted in anticipation of having to pay these fees, and we budgeted conservatively for them. The fees are expected to reduce from a variable rate, which we currently have. It starts at about $485 a month and can be as high as almost $600 a month. That fee will go down to, as outlined, a static fee of $330.70 a month. And with that, I also have Mr. Joe Trickey from Northern Illinois University, just in case you have any questions that I may not be able to answer. But with that, I welcome any questions or comments.
I see this is a budgeted amount in FY 2018.
Correct.
Okay.
I should also clarify that this is an auto renewal, and we don't normally do those, but in this case, being a critical infrastructure piece, we didn't want to have any situation where that contract had lapsed and didn't renew properly. So this will be a continual annual fee. So I just want to make sure that council was aware of that.
Would that $4,000 be pretty firm year to year?
As far as we can tell, this is a 5-year term, and it doesn't appear that has variation to it.
Okay. Roll call.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you.
Next up, Resolution 2018-057, approving an intergovernmental agreement with the DeKalb Community Unit School District Number 428. Motion.
So moved.
Second.
Speaking to this item is Police Chief Gene Lowry once again.
Thank you, Council. I guess just as an introductory comment, I'd like to say this has been a collaborative effort between the City of DeKalb and School District 428. It's been a pleasure working with them in regard to this. This in total will fuse several different agreements under four corners of one document, and it's a 10-year period, so it's something we shouldn't have to revisit or come back to another council meeting for quite some time. So, having said that, I offer a lot of praise to the new superintendent who helped shepherd this through the school board, and despite many things that he has had to adapt to, he did give us time to get this done. Really what this agreement is all about is it summarizes the components of several things. again, collaborative, in the best interest of both parties. The school resource officers, and just real quickly, those school resource officers are invaluable. They're not only invaluable to the school, they're invaluable to the police department. And it's not always about the arrest or about the teaching that they do in class at times, or the presentations they make, but it's about the establishment of relationships with those kids. A lot of those kids from the middle school on up get to know those two officers and get to know them so well that at times their leadership, their mentoring, and at times intervention goes a long way in getting kids on the right track. So those SROs are invaluable. That's one component. The reciprocal reporting agreement is another. The reciprocal reporting agreement's been around for years, but this really formalizes that information exchange. And it's not about having every bit of information, it's about having information that's key to school safety, individual issues or individual concerns that might jeopardize safety and things of that nature. This really, in accordance with state law, establishes a methodology by which we can exchange information in a lawful manner. Crossing guards, I just want to say amen. This is a process the police department's lived with for a long time. It is a necessary function, but it just outlived the resources we have to manage it. So this agreement finally transitions the crossing guard program into the hands of the district. In total, our dealing with it beyond this budget will be over. And we will, however, we will still continue to work with the school district in regard to any concerns they have, emergency coverage that may come up that's essential to the safety of the students that may be jeopardized by a crossing guard not being present. But I have to say, the vendor's done an excellent job. So the demand for service on the police department over the last several months has really decreased, and it's been a huge benefit. So I have to thank you for allowing us to go down that road. The next component is the water tower painting. That's something that Public Works is engaging in regard to the restoration of that north water tower. That will also include the high school emblem being restored on that. That will be worked out between the parties. Again, you know, we always look at the university and the things we do to promote the university as our anchor in this community. We sometimes forget about that high school and some of the things that are happening there. So that emblem on that water tower is really a nice addition in that neighborhood. In addition, the fourth area that it lays the groundwork for a yet-to-be-determined arrangement, but it introduces it and kind of opens the door for it, is the security camera access to the schools by the police department. It's not for a 24/7 monitoring or a Big Brother situation. It's for situations where we have calls or emergencies that exist within the school that we can respond to, and while officers are responding, our telecommunicators will be able to see what's going on in the area that's impacted. That's huge information, huge intelligence going into a situation, especially in light of things we've seen across this country with active shooters. So that's a big advancement for us. We'd like to see that repeated in other buildings throughout the area, some of which we already have some arrangements with monitoring videos under certain circumstances. So this agreement takes part and parcel, all of those, puts it together. The explicit detail is within the information you have as far as the agenda goes. I highly recommend we approve this. It will certainly solve a lot of the processes and things that we have going on between us and the district. Thank you.
Any comments or questions of Chief Lowry? This is really a meaty kind of document. I was so impressed when I read through it, and it took some time to read through it too. So.
Just one question, if I may.
Yes.
Gene, has this already been approved by the school district?
Yes, and thank you, Alderman Fanouken. This has gone through both readings with the school board, and it has been approved. So it is at our level now.
Thank you.
Roll call.
Verbeek?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko? Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you very much.
Moving right along, Resolution 2018-058, authorizing a second amendment to the 230 East Lincoln Highway Development Incentive Agreement, the Bandits Castle LLC. Motion.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Let the record show that Alderman Fagan has recused himself from this discussion, but not recusing himself and heavy discussion is Jason Mitchnick.
Thank you, Mayor. The resolution before you for consideration would be a second amendment to our redevelopment agreement for 230 East Lincoln Highway. This comes after our previous amendment, which increased the funding. This amendment does not affect the funding. This amendment is strictly to modify the terms of repayment under the agreement. Following our reimbursement for this incentive, that allowed the owner to finalize his construction loan and then apply for his long-term financing through the Small Business Administration SBA 504 loan program. Through the review of his application for the long-term financing, legal counsel for the SBA program did come back and say that the terms for repayment in the event of default did need to match. So our previous agreement had a 10-year term for repayment. What this would do is this would increase the repayment to 20 years. The forgiveness of the loan is, in effect, is still 10 years. So essentially 10% annually would be forgiven off the amount of the incentive. However, in the event of a default, the owner would then have 20 years instead of the 10 years to repay that, whatever the balance of the loan would be, depending on the term. And this is the request of the Small Business Administration. This will allow him to move into that permanent financing. With that, I would entertain any questions the council has.
So this is simply aligning the two
Correct.
with SBA, yeah. Okay. Any comments or questions? Roll call.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Noriko? Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
7 yes.
Resolution passes. Thank you, Jason. Next, Resolution 2018-059, authorizing a standard agreement for construction services at Illinois airports for architectural and engineering, planning, and special services with Hanson Professional Services, Inc., for the rehabilitation of the entrance road and parking lot at DeKalb Taylor Municipal Airport. Motion.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Tom Cleveland, our airport manager, will speak to this item. Tom?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. This is a standard agreement for construction phase services for the entrance road and parking lot at the airport from Hanson Professional Services. Hanson provided the Phase 1 engineering for this project, and the Illinois Division of Aeronautics requires Hanson to provide the Phase 2 engineering services for us. This project is funded by the FAA, state, and the city. The project cost is approximately $600,000. The city of DeKalb share of the project is $30,593, which we've already paid. So this is just an engineering agreement for Hanson Professional Services to oversee the project. And I'll answer any questions you have.
Okay. Couldn't get over the boilerplate that Hanson has for this agreement. How many pages was it?
Too many.
Too many? Wow. I don't think I read every word. Roll call.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you, Tom. Moving right along, Resolution 2018-060, authorizing a one-year contract extension of a purchasing agreement with Petroleum Traders Corporation for the purchase of vehicle fuel for the period of August 1, 2018 to July 31, 2019. Motion.
So moved.
Been, second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. With further discussion of this is our Assistant Public Works Director, Brian Faber.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The item before you is for your consideration is a request for approval of a one-year fuel contract extension with Petroleum Traders Corporation, or PTC. Fuel is currently purchased by the Public Works Department and is used by all city departments, as well as Voluntary Action Center, Children's Learning Center, and the Park District. PTC has been the supplier of fuel to the city since being awarded a bid in 2016. The original term of the contract was for 2 years, but allowed for 3 additional one-year extensions with mutual consent of both parties. The contract also allowed for a one-time economic adjustment for each one-year extension not to exceed the consumer price index. PTC has agreed to extend the agreement for 1 year under the same terms and conditions with no CPI increase. In 2017, the city purchased 128,000 gallons of fuel at a cost of $240,000. Of this amount, however, less than $4,000 was attributed to the vendor's delivery cost, which is the only variable as it relates to the city's fuel costs. The remainder of the fuel costs are made up of the OPIS price, which is more or less the wholesale price that the vendor pays, and taxes on fuel, of which we are exempt on some of those taxes, but not all. These two components of the fuel price do not vary, however, from vendor to vendor and make up almost 98% of the overall fuel cost to the city. Given the vendor's current low margin delivery costs coupled with the agreements not to increase the price, staff recommends council approve a one-year contract extension with PTC. And I would be happy to answer any questions regarding this.
Are there any questions of Brian? Hearing none, roll call.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you, Brian. Resolution 2018-061, authorizing the disposition of personal property of the city of DeKalb, Illinois. Motion.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Speaking to this item is Management Analyst Ray Munch. Ray?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Before you this evening is a request to seek the disposition of a total of 7 vehicles that are currently owned by the City of DeKalb. In Chapter 54 of the Municipal Code, Section 15, the city is authorized to dispose of property by sale, trade-in, transfer, or salvage once it is deemed that that property no longer has value to the city. So in this case, staff has identified a total of 7 vehicles that are ready to be surplused. The police department identified 2 police sedans, a 2005 and 2007 Ford Crown Victoria, and the Public Works Department identified a total of 5 vehicles, which include a street sweeper, several SUVs, a pickup truck, and a van. These vehicles are phased out for a number of reasons, but in general, the phase out is based on age, general vehicle condition, or their ongoing maintenance costs. In the case of the police department, these 2 vehicles that are being phased out were identified in an item that was brought to the council on April 9th when approval was given to purchase 2 new police interceptor utility vehicles. So those vehicles will be phased out as part of that. For the Public Works Department, they purchased the new street sweeper in late summer of 2017 and also a Ford F-250 pickup truck in the fall of 2017, which are 2 of the vehicles on that list were replaced by those vehicles. So that's the general overview of the item. If you have any questions, I would be happy to address those.
Alderman Fanouken.
Actually, both Tim and Ray and I have had a conversation in this. One of the things that we could avoid some of this process is if we were to trade in these vehicles when we purchase the new ones. I mean, when we purchase the new ones, we've already identified which vehicles they're going to replace. And then we could save some money on the upfront cost of those new vehicles. So just maybe going forward, we can include that as part of our process. Thank you.
Why haven't we done that in the past?
It just hasn't been in the procedures as they have been ongoing in the city.
So I can speak to the police vehicles. I had a conversation with Deputy Chief Petrogallo on these, and this was sort of a unique instance in that in order to get the state bid pricing this time around, we actually had to seek the purchase through a dealership, I believe in Tinley Park or some other south suburb.
Yes.
So the trade-in wasn't feasible. The other thing to consider is we're talking about vehicles with 150,000 plus miles, and the willingness to even accept a trade might be an issue on some of these.
Yeah, but I can speak from experience that even on the state contract, there are procedures to go ahead and trade vehicles in, because we did that at the university all the time, even on the purchase of police vehicles.
I would like to address that. That's okay. We do that. We always make an assessment on trade-in value, either through a local dealer if we're transacting it under where they meet the state bid, or with the vendor we go with. These two vehicles in question are in such bad condition that the amount of money they would tender would cost us. We would not reap any benefit because of the transportation cost to get the vehicles to them. So that's why we opted to go with the disposition as Ray's indicated. But we always check on trade-in value because it's the quickest way to get rid of the vehicle.
It is, and it just, then we can avoid this procedure also. So thank you.
Bill, would you agree that when we have a situation like that with vehicles that have no value whatsoever, that putting them on an auction might gain us something? Or are those people who are going to bid on these items at auction so savvy that they would determine also that they're worth nothing?
Well, that's typically what'll happen. We'll get scrap value maybe at best if they're as bad as we're being perceived. And I'm not doubting that, Chief. Don't misunderstand me. But usually by the time the police vehicles are traded, they haven't been in use as police vehicles. They've been used elsewhere in the fleet. And so that's, it isn't just on the police vehicles, but on the pickup trucks, et cetera. It's something that we could put in place across the fleet. And that's not to knock anybody who's done it in the past. It's just a different way of doing it, and we might find it more cost effective because now we don't have to include the time spent in preparing for an auction. That's all. Thank you.
Any further discussion of this? Roll call.
Markwart,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
8 yes.
We have one item tonight for, on new and unfinished business, and that is local bidder preference. And this is a report-only item, right?
That's correct.
And so I'd like to have Public Works Director Tim Holdeman to address this.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Last July, in association with the street maintenance program for 2017, a local bidder was lost the bid to a non-local bidder in a margin less than 1% of the total bid, which was about $1 million. At that time, there was discussion with regard to a local bidder preference. Subsequent to that, the mayor asked me to bring this forward for discussion with City Council. Our purpose tonight is to ask council's opinion as to whether or not staff should pursue drafting a local bidders ordinance, and if so, answer some of the more detailed questions about its form and the definition of what local might be. We've provided background in your material, including the previous DeKalb ordinance, which was supplanted by the purchasing manual in August 2015. The purchasing manual does not have any local preference. That former DeKalb ordinance was for construction and repair only.
So infrastructure, construction, maintenance, and repair only. Had no state or federal funding could be associated with a project in which it was applied. There were 2 tiers established in that ordinance, 1 tier within the city, 1 tier within the county. So if the bid was if the bid of a local bidder, either tier 1 or tier 2, was within 5%, they were allowed to match the non-local bid. Tier 1 within the city had a priority over tier 2. Your memo also includes some of the summary discussion that took place in August and September when this issue was brought up again. At that time, local bidder preference was looked at in terms of the comparable communities that might apply it, and only one, City of Sycamore, has such an ordinance. St. Charles does have a policy, and I've included a couple of other examples of local bidder preference, one from the village of New Lenox, one from the city of Elgin, and one from the town of Normal, which was just a policy. There are different arguments for and against a local bidder preference. Basically, the arguments for it are that it encourages business to stay within the community, it creates jobs, increases local tax revenues. Arguments against it include the increased cost, and because it discourages competition, and that it goes against the public purchasing principles of equity, impartiality, open competition, and best value. There are several different forms in which a local bidder preference can take. The most common is a preference with the ability to match the non-local bidder. So tonight we'd like to have a discussion with council, or hear council's discussion with regard to your desire for staff to pursue the drafting of an ordinance for local bidder preference. Thank you, Mayor.
I realize the hour is getting late, but I admit I was the one who asked the question, and I ask you to bring this back to us. A classic example of being careful what you wish or what you ask for. However, having said that, I think it's worth a discussion. I took part in that vote last year where a local bidder lost a $1 million some contract by $1,000. You know, and I like the idea of putting our money with local businesses that hire local people. Those local people are living in the city of DeKalb. Those local people are paying taxes here. And I realize that's but one of the advantages of having a local bidder preference. Having said that, I welcome any questions, comments, or whatever. Alderman Fagan.
Yeah, this is something, I don't know why it was, we used to have this, and then, do you remember what we used to have on ours? Was it 5%? Within 5?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know why it was taken away, but I've heard about this. One of the things that people talk about is, you know, it could cost us more money. Not if we handle it from the match and lowest bid. We have to be fair about this also. I mean, so we might want to look at percentage-wise as to match. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, if the local is 20% off, and all of a sudden he says, yeah, I'll come down and match it, you know. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Tim?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the city of Sycamore is an example of a graduated percent match option, where anything up to 500,000, the local match can be within 5%.
Right.
From 500,000 to 750,000, it's 4, and it goes down to a 1% between 1.25 and 1.5 million. And then above 1.5, there's no local preference applied. And so you have complete flexibility in how you would apply that gradationally, so to speak.
How often would that we would go over 1.5 in the city of DeKalb?
Well, we will be going for the street maintenance project will be about 1.9.
Yeah.
However, because we will be using state MFT funding, that would make it ineligible for the local preference. Now, that's something else that was unique in my research that I found in DeKalb's previous. It was limited to infrastructure, construction, maintenance, and repair. There's many of the other ones that expand all goods and services. So it wouldn't just be limited to construction projects, but it would include other goods and services as well.
Right. I like the Sycamore way it's structured. The graduated. Right.
Yeah, what I think, if it's the council's decision, obviously, but if we have a local bidder preference, we can pretty much set the parameters of that local bidder preference as it relates to qualifications, if you will, to qualify. For example, you mentioned Sycamore. I have it here. To them, a local preference is any business that is located within the limits of the county. Now, that makes sense. I mean, why would we turn away a bidder from Sycamore or Hinckley or Cortland or wherever? Because they too could be in a position to have residents who spend money in DeKalb, whatever. So, but we wouldn't have to do that. I mean, if we wanted to make it city-specific, we could say located within the city of DeKalb. So that's what I like about the idea of at least discussing this. Alderman Fanouken.
When we removed the local bidder preferences was because we weren't getting bids from people out of town because they knew they would get matched and lose it, so they didn't want to waste the time of going ahead and preparing a bid. And so then once the locals knew they had it locked in anyway, prices were up. We have had more favorable bids come through since we have allowed out-of-town people on an equal, fair basis to make those bids. And, again, that's a background I come out of it working in NIU,
Sure.
that it was everything had to be, there were no preferences. Even if you wanted to buy something locally over a certain dollar amount, you couldn't. You had to go out for a bid. And I just think that we would be short-sighted to go back to the old system where we were costing ourselves more money in the long run.
Alderman Jacobson.
I remember at the time we had the discussion of getting rid of it. Again, it was a very sticky issue both ways. I agree with Bill. What we were seeing is a lot of the out-of-towners refused. I mean, they would come into the room and tell us, we refuse to bid on your projects anymore because it just doesn't make sense for us to put the week or 10 days into putting the bid package together as you want it, being that they felt we required very in-depth bids, knowing that even if someone's even close to us within 5%, that they're going to get the business anyway. And my comment at the time was, if you're local and you're in DeKalb, you can beat that bid. There's no way an out-of-town company from Rockford or Aurora or Chicago, when you account for the transportation and out-of-town sleeping costs and out-of-town per diems and all those things, a local company should be able to win that bid 100% of the time based on their geographics because they have less cost to do it. If they're not, it's because they want to take a higher margin. And again, to be fair, with fair and open bidding, to get the best prices, the way the system is supposed to work, I just didn't, I know that there was a majority of us that just didn't believe we were seeing in practice that happening. And you would hope that the local bidder is always going to be cheapest. I would love for all the money to go to every one of our DeKalb contractors 100% of the time. That requires them to sharpen their pencil and give us their best bid in fairness. And I don't think that's too much to ask of local contractors.
Point well taken, thank you. Any other comments? Alderman Favor.
And, I know sometimes we talk about commodities and things like that, so we are looking for the lowest price, and we have done this on a few of the other projects. Lowest cost isn't always the best value. So, and that's one of the things, it's hard to quantify, but I'm living it right now with my daily job. So the lowest cost is not the best, quality and delivery, on time, those are the things that, to have a product that's put in, to have, to have it long-lasting, things like that. So I know it's much harder to quantify. It's not just easy to get an RFP. But again, several projects that we've had I should say several. I know of a couple projects that we've had where we have not chosen the lowest bidder, and I appreciate that.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes. Alderman Fanouken.
And again, I think the way the language reads is the lowest responsible bid, and so that does allow for substitutions or whatever, because there are going to be some items that won't meet the bid spec that you put, even if it is the lowest dollar amount. And so that's why you do review your bids, and like you do in your job, and that's what I had to do every time we went out to purchase vehicles. There were times that we did not accept the lowest dollar amount because we knew it did not meet the specs, and that still gives us the opportunity to do that, with a no local bidder preference.
Alderman Verbeek.
And that's lowest responsible bid.
Right.
So we do have our responsible bidder ordinance in place, correct? From a standpoint of meeting all of the necessary requirements of a responsible bidder ordinance?
Yes, the city's purchasing manual contemplates that. We also put that in our bid specifications, and it's also a component of Illinois law. So where there's a qualitative difference in products, or where I've seen in circumstances where communities have selected a local vendor because of some significant advantage of having the locale, the proximity. I know, for example, several years ago, Aurora had a paving contract where the lowest bidder, their asphalt plant was 2 hours or 90 minutes away, and they looked at that qualitatively and determined that the reduction in asphalt temperatures from being trucked that far would adversely affect the project, so they picked a local bidder on the basis of getting a warmer, superior product that was better for the outcome. So yes, it is certainly a component.
But I think we're missing the training component, aren't we? Wouldn't we want to consider as a part of this adding the training component, meaning that the quality of workmanship, they've certified that they've performed all the training necessary to complete that work? Do you know if the training component is included in our ordinance?
We don't have a training requirement on our ordinance, but depending on the nature of the project, certain types of projects require, for example, for a lot of our road projects, we require IDOT pre-qualification that you've demonstrated you've met the minimum competency levels for training. There are requirements for some types of work that you meet minimum levels of training for journeymen and for different types of people that are employed on the project, so that would be project specific.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, if I could, one
Yeah.
example of where you wouldn't necessarily have the best product for the lowest price is, for example, equipment in which you want to maintain continuity and consistency with your existing equipment, such as our water meters. It wouldn't be advantageous for us to go with a low bidder and then have several different types of water meters. It's best to stay with the same meter so your meter reading equipment works on all of them.
Okay. Okay, well, again, this is an information item. I don't know if I hear consensus here. I hear a number of different views. I respect that. Any other comments? Thank you, Tim. Okay, we get to the point where we have communications. I did get a note here on our rave alert system that we do have a severe thunderstorm warning in effect until 9:45, so I'd suggest you might want to stay in the building until then. And we do have communications, which I know will be very interesting. And we will start with our ever-interesting Dave Jacobson.
No report.
Alderman Fanouken.
No report this evening.
Alderman Markwart.
No report.
Alderman Fagan.
I'm the liaison for the EDC, and we had a meeting here last Friday morning. It was one of our, I think they're good meetings.
Yeah.
This one was really a good meeting we had regarding the building inspections. We had Joellen, Jason, and the fire chief there.
Here, there's the current.
And explaining everything. I thought it went really well. A lot of good questions was asked and a lot of good answers were given. Now, the other thing was the business friendly, on how can we be more business friendly? Well, we could be sitting there for days. So what EDC has decided to do is keep it on their agenda every month. So it's there. And just wanted to update everybody on that.
Thank you. Alderman Noriko.
Mark your calendars. Tomorrow is a Ward 5 meeting, and Public Works, Tim Holdeman will be there to present the Elwood Neighborhood Street Maintenance Plan. We're also going to talk about the fiscal year 19 budget planning process and the city manager's search. Meeting at 5:30 here in City Council chambers to accommodate the Public Works presentation. So I look forward to the huge crowd.
Good. Thank you, Kate. Thank you for doing that. Alderman Verbeek.
We had an exciting weekend in the 6th Ward. Congratulations to all of the college graduates. Nearly 30,000 people attended the 4 commencement exercises at the Convocation Center for their students graduating from college. We are also hosting 15 high school commencements at the Convocation Center, so we'll likely see nearly 100,000 people come through the 6th Ward to attend high school commencements. So we look forward to showing them a great time.
You do get bigger numbers than the Ward.
Thank you, Alderman Verbeek. Alderman Favor?
No report.
I do have a short report. It was about 60 days ago when I pledged that not only the search for a new city manager would begin immediately, but that it would be open and transparent. Tonight I can report we continue the process, which started in earnest with a committee of the whole meeting dedicated to the search parameters at a meeting we had here on April 9. Since then, we've been working with Patty Hoppenstedt, fully realizing when we approved her as our interim manager that she would be leaving the city due to relocation of her family to Tennessee. Tonight, I will be discussing with City Council in executive session our options to name another interim. In so doing, I am confident that operations here in City Hall will remain on an even keel, and while Patty has not yet provided a resignation date, we suspect that will probably be sooner as opposed to later. Earlier this afternoon at the close of business, the deadline for request for proposals was reached. From these, we expect Council to consider search firms from which one may be chosen in early June. Following the drafting of a job announcement, advertising, and the acceptance of applications will then move forward. I've asked City Council to recommend names of citizens who will be involved in the selection process. I would hope to have these names by the end of next week. Already a good number of folks have volunteered, and I encourage residents to submit recommendations to their alderman or to me over the next week or so. I will continue to monitor where we are in the search process and will make periodic reports like this over the coming months, and I truly appreciate the engagement of the public. One other interesting thing I'd like to share with our council members tonight and the public. Early last fall, during the conference of the Illinois Municipal League, I had the opportunity to meet Mayor Mike Inman of Macomb. Our casual conversation resulted in a mutual idea of convening mayors from university communities to explore the feasibility of creating a group of us to have occasional conversations about the common challenges and the common opportunities that we have as municipalities with state universities. We thought we'd start small and decided that we'd involve those directional institutions, Western Illinois at Macomb, Eastern Illinois at Charleston, Southern Illinois at Carbondale and Edwardsville, and Northern Illinois here in DeKalb. We're meeting in early June in Springfield, and we'll determine our strategy. Included will be a discussion, I'm sure, as to what other institutions may add value moving forward. Now, this is somewhat similar to what our Police Chief Gene Lowry has done in conversations with departments in other university communities. So I'm anxious to see what comes out of our initial sit-down, and we'll report back to the city and to Northern with these ideas, and I'll try to keep everybody informed about how that goes, but I think it's probably a pretty good idea. Having said that, we'll move along the row down here. Ruth, do you have anything report?
No, sir, no report.
Dean Frieders, our city attorney.
No, Mayor, when we get to the motion for executive session, if I could speak for just a moment.
Oh, sure, yes. After I announce what they were going to discuss, or?
I just wanted to cover the exemptions for council this evening.
Oh, I see. Okay, very good. Our interim city manager, Patty Hoppenstedt.
No report.
Gene Lowry, our police chief.
No report.
Molly Talkington, our finance director.
I just wanted to bring up, pardon my voice, but I did have a question regarding the library rebate and how the rebate checks will be issued to homeowners, if it's the current homeowner or a prior homeowner that had paid during the tax. So since we received the information on the parcels from the county, what will happen is kind of a fixed date and time. So whoever the owner on record is for that file that the county provided would be who the checks, rebate checks, will be issued to. While it's not perfect, that's probably the best information we can get is from the county. So what will happen, there will likely be some homes in which there was a sale prior to that list. So if the person owns the home now and is on the list that was given from the county, they'll receive the rebate, and the owner that was there when the taxes were paid will not, because they're not the owner on record. It'll also kind of happen the other way, where maybe there will still be some that are listed as the owner on record who were here that paid those taxes but are no longer the owner at this point in time because they've sold the house since that date. And so we're working with the library to really figure out all of that during this. How do we get the rebate checks to the citizens, and kind of how do we inform those owners that maybe are no longer in the city to that their rebate check is here. So we'll have more information as we progress down this path.
Thank you, Molly. Eric Hicks, our fire chief.
No report.
Joel and Charlton, community development.
Two real quick things just to let everyone know. The Planning and Zoning Commission met last week and will be forwarding their recommendation to a future meeting of yours for the Pizza Hut restaurant on West Lincoln Highway. It was recommended for approval, and they're proposing to tear down the existing building and reconstruct a multi-use building on that site. So we look forward to that moving through the process. Also, just a quick update, I had the pleasure of attending the Mardi Gras event, which was 2 weekends ago on May 5th and 6th. It was a successful event. They had the wine walk on Friday, which encouraged, they had a lot of tickets sold and encouraged people to go into individual stores. I found a really cool picture of a cow that I purchased during my walk around. And then also that night was the Egyptian Theater event for the variety show, which I think had 200 more people than it had last year. So it was a great evening and a great event. The organizers are looking to debrief on ways to make it more successful and build the event for next year. So just wanted to congratulate the group on a really well-run event.
Thank you. Tim, any other notes?
Yes, Mayor, I want to thank Judy Schneider of the Public Works Department and the Master Gardeners who did many plantings over the weekend in the downtown planters. Those are a group of volunteers which really help us get that job done. Also, the Illinois Toll Road, the Annie Glidden Interchange, the westbound entrance has been completed. It's open as of May 10th, and now they'll go to shut down the other 3 legs, the westbound exit, eastbound exit, and eastbound entrance. And those will be shut down as of tomorrow, weather pending, and will be remain shut down until June and July. Also, want to report that we did do a survey of the South 2nd Street residents. We sent out return receipts to 43 residents. We received 20 responses. We have an 18-2 in favor of removing the historical curbs. So that part of the project for our street maintenance will be included, and we'll discuss that more when we bring it back with a request or with a recommendation for awarding the bid. Also, our 2018 street maintenance requests for bids are close to being ready to go out. So it looks like we'll be ready to go to that project in June, mid-June, get started with that. And also, this week we have the refuse and the city engineer proposals coming in on Thursday and Friday, so it's a big week for Public Works.
Thank you, Tim. Chris Randall, our HR Director.
No report.
And finally, Mark Thorson, our IT Director.
No report.
Okay, very good. I'd like to call now for a recess for executive session of the City Council. And before I read the 3 items that we're going to discuss, Dean Frieders would like to make a comment.
Yes, Mayor, we would request to discuss personnel as provided for in 5 LCS 120/2C1. Executive session minutes as provided for in 5 LCS 120/2C21. Collective bargaining as provided for in 5 LCS 120/2C2. And selection of a person to fill a vacancy in public office pursuant to 5 LCS 120/2C3.
You've just read those. Do I have to read those again?
No, Mayor.
Okay, very good. I'd entertain a motion to hold an executive session or recess.
Make that motion. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Mayor, that recalls a roll call vote.
I beg your pardon?
That calls for a roll call vote.
Okay, roll call.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
We are now in recess. Thank you.